Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto has been adopted and raised by Anko after nearly being burned alive. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. October 10th, the day of the Kyuubi. Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage, stood in the office that had once been his, then his successors. He held a small blonde child in his arms as he stared out the window, looking out over the devastated city of Konoha as people scurried everywhere, putting out fires, rescuing the trapped, and gathering the dead caused by the Kyuubi's sudden and violent attack. Hiruzen Sarutobi sighed and looked down at the child in his arms. The sleeping blonde child was smiling faintly. He had an intricate seal inscribed on his belly, and his hair was the same striking blonde as his father's. "I am sorry for this, Naruto," Sarutobi said softly as he turned, handing the young child to an Anbu he trusted above all others. In order to hide his identity from his father's enemies, Naruto must not be told his heritage until he comes of age. As such, he will be christened Uzumaki Naruto after his mother, and he will be raised in orphanage. Hopefully we will be able to find a good family willing to adopt him soon, one who will look past what he carries inside of him. Sarutobi sighed again. "I fear that, despite Minato's final wishes, that the people of Konoha will not view Naruto as a hero for keeping the Kyuubi contained within him." The old man took a puff on his pipe before continuing. "Inu no Kakashi. I ask two great favors of you." The Anbu, who was carefully cradling the sleeping child, looked back up at his Hokage. "I first ask that you personally take charge of the Anbu who will be detailed to keep an eye on Naruto to ensure that he should come to no harm." The dog-masked Anbu nodded in acknowledgement of this first request. "The second is that when he is old enough, should he choose to become a ninja, I want you to teach him the Rasengan." The dog-masked Anbu nodded again. "It would be my honor, Hokage-sama. He is my sensei's son, and if allowed, I will teach him everything I know." Sarutobi nodded in acknowledgement as he turned to look out the window again. The Anbu, understanding he was dismissed, carefully carried the blonde child out of the Hokage's office, heading for the orphanage. Sarutobi took a few more puffs on his pipe before sighing and turning to leave the office himself, heading for the council chambers and an emergency meeting of the Konoha Council. The demon should be destroyed. Uchiha Fugaku railed as he stood, slamming his hands down on the council table. All around him in the council chambers, the majority of the other 32 members of the council present muttered their agreement with this sentiment. The only exceptions were Sarutobi Akemi, Aburame Shibi, and Hiashi Hyuga. At the head of the table, Sarutobi Hiruzen crossed his hands, his face grim. "The boy will not be harmed. It was Namikaze Minato, your beloved Yondaime's, dying wish that his son be seen as a hero for containing the Kyuubi no Kitsune. It is only logical then, even if the Hokage wishes him to be raised under a different name to protect him from his enemies outside of Konoha, that the child be treated with the proper dignity and respect due to him." Aburame Shibi spoke calmly. Sarutobi silently thanked the man for being a rare voice of reason. "But he is the demon. We must kill him before he grows too powerful," Councilman Danzo said, calm on the outside but with anger and hatred visible in his eyes. And equally calm on the outside, Hiashi Hyuga spoke up. "The Yondaime was Konoha's greatest seal master, surpassing even Jiraiya of the Sannin in power and skill. His seal will hold. The Kyuubi will be contained. Instead of killing his son," and here Hiashi emphasized the word son, driving home the blood relationship between the vessel of the Kyuubi no Kitsune and the village's beloved Yondaime, which would dishonor the memory of the very man who gave his life to save this village and who used his own son to seal the Kyuubi away. "We should instead ensure that the boy is well looked after and is trained well for the day that he is told his true heritage." It was a well-known fact that the Hyuga clan and the Namikaze clan had had close ties even before the founding of Konohagakure. "But that monster killed my husband," Haruno screeched. The pink-haired woman was not a ninja like most of the other clan heads, but she was normally a shrewd politician. "Enough of this." Sarutobi blinked as his daughter Akemi slammed her hands down on the table, standing as she did so. "The Yondaime Hokage made his final wishes known, and my father, who you asked to take up the mantle of Hokage again, has made them into law. There is no more need for discussion. The child will not be harmed." The reigning Sarutobi clan head turned to face her father, her face more collected. When she spoke, her voice was calm and formal. "Hokage-sama, the Sarutobi clan formally requests that the Hokage pass a law protecting Uzumaki Naruto, son of Namikaze Naruto, and heir to the Namikaze and Uzumaki clans." Sarutobi was pleased that his daughter knew him so well. He was also pleased to note that Hyuga Hiashi and Aburame Shibi had both stood in support of his daughter's request. As the three looked around at their peers, slowly others stood. Sarutobi saw the Ino Shikacho trio stand almost immediately, followed swiftly by the representatives of several other major clans, including the Inyazuka, Kuroda, and Yakushi clans. Finally those who were going to stand had stood, and those who remained sitting glared around angrily at their standing comrades. Uchiha Fugaku suddenly grinned. Of the 33 clan members present, 16 had stood in support of the motion, and 17 had remained seated in opposition. So why was the Hokage smiling? So, we have 16 in favor of protecting Uzumaki Naruto and 17 in favor of his execution. Even if the final decision in this matter was not mine and mine alone, the Hokage made eye contact with several members of the council before he continued. I happen to have in my possession the wills of both Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze, as well as a signed affidavit by Hada Kakashi, who is currently performing a duty for me. Kakashi's affidavit grants his vote for any measures brought to a vote during this session of the council in favor of the Sarutobi clan. Sarutobi paused as he let that fact sink in. He saw several members of the council shrink as they realized he had just tied the vote. After a few seconds he pushed forward copies of 2 large scrolls, using a variation of the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu place a temporary copy in front of everyone at the table. The wills, as you can see for yourself, are authentic and detail that, in the event of their deaths, who shall carry the votes for clans Uzumaki and Namikaze until Naruto reaches his majority. Sarutobi grinned in satisfaction as Fugaku Uchiha and Danzo both dropped their heads in defeat. So, as you can see, your desire to execute the child of the 4th Hokage, who has committed no crimes, would never have passed, even if I would have allowed an actual vote to take place. Now, there is a matter to discuss. Sarutobi removed a simple document from his robes and replicated it so that everyone in the council room could read a copy. I have already stamped this and filed it with the official archives. This law hereby makes it illegal for anyone to tell anyone that the Kyuubi is sealed inside Naruto Uzumaki, who is not already aware of this fact. It also makes it illegal to tell them about this law as well. The only exceptions to this rule are the sitting Hokage and Naruto himself. The sentence for breaking this law. Sarutobi leant forward and crossed his hands before him, his face serious, his eyes cold. Is immediate execution. Sarutobi heard the council gasp at this. Silently, Sarutobi prayed that this measure would be enough to allow the boy to grow up. October 10th, 6 years after the day of the Kyuubi. Naruto Uzumaki ran. He ran through the streets of Konoha faster than he ever had before. Stupid, stupid, stupid. He muttered breathlessly to himself as he ran, his clothes cut in several places, blood evident on the edges of the cuts. Naruto knew better than to go outside on the 10th of October. It was his birthday. It was also his least favorite day of the year. For as long as he could remember, the hatred that the villagers seemed to show him was always magnified on the anniversary of the day of the Kyuubi. They didn't just glare at him and avoid him and charge him outrageous prices for spoiled food. They tried to kill him. So for the last 4 years Naruto Uzumaki had stayed inside, locked his door, and prayed they were too scared to attempt to break into his home. But this year he took the risk, and now he was paying for it. The day before, the day he normally celebrated his birthday, he had met someone special. She was cute, with nice pink hair and a big forehead. Flashback. He had met her while he was in the park. He had been running because he had pulled a prank on one of the annoying shopkeepers who always ran him out of their shops for no reason. He promptly forgot his joy over pulling off a successful prank though when he saw her. She was kneeling on the ground crying as a group of kids stood around taunting her, making fun of her forehead. Naruto's first instinct was always prank first and ask question later when he saw someone being bullied. He knew what it was like to have people dislike you for something you had no control over, though in his case, he still had no idea why they had originally hated him. Thinking quickly, he pulled out a pair of water balloons and tossed them towards the 2 girls, who seemed to be the ringleaders of the abuse. Splash splash. Sakura looked up at the sudden sound to see that Kitsumi and Kazumi, the 2 ringleaders of the girls who always tormented her and taunted her for her big forehead, were soaking wet, with bits of orange rubber clinging to them. Behind her she heard the lilting sounds of a young boy laughing. For a second she thought he was laughing at her, but then it dawned on her that he was laughing at the 2 soaked girls. Turning her head she saw a young boy, wearing nothing but bright orange. He was bent over holding his stomach in laughter, but in his free right hand, she could see he was holding an orange water balloon. Why you brat? Why the heck did you do this? Kitsumi yelled, glaring angrily at the young boy. Naruto stood up fully, still grinning. He shot the fallen girl a genuine smile before focusing his gaze on her attackers again. You know, you shouldn't gang up on someone. It isn't nice. Naruto began tossing the water balloon lightly into the air, catching it again each time it fell. His grin grew just a little more feral. As he stepped closer, Sakura noticed the strange scars on his face. They made him look kind of exotic. She instantly felt herself blushing faintly. Hami, could this be my first crush? She thought quietly. Shanro inner Sakura cried out. Sakura's own surprise at hearing her own voice speak in her head was promptly forgotten as Naruto flicked his arm forward, the water balloon speeding forward and slamming into a third girl with a wet slamming sound. The girl nearly fell over in surprise. Most of the girls stumbled backwards, abandoning the ringleaders as none of them wanted to get wet. The festival was tomorrow and they didn't want to be grounded for coming home wet. Why don't you girls run on home to your mommies? You are obviously too scared to do anything when someone stands up to you. Naruto stopped and swiftly tossed another 2 water balloons at the ringleaders. The 2 stood stock still, disbelieving that anyone would dare insult members of the Uchiha clan, much less attack them. Splat splat. The 2 balloons Naruto had thrown had been special. They were filled with honey. The WWWW1. When high-pitched shrieks rang out as Katsumi and Kazumi were drenched in the sticky substance. Crying they turned and ran off. Naruto watched them go, grinning, until they disappeared around a group of trees. Thank you. Naruto turned to find the girl with the pink hair standing and bowing in front of him. It was no problem. I really don't like it when people gang up on someone to abuse them. People have been doing it to me my entire life. Naruto said, blushing slightly and scratching the back of his neck absent-mindedly. Sakura blinked. People have been picking on this guy. But he seems so nice. And he's cute. Inner Sakura added, causing Sakura to blush again. Thank you. I'm Sakura. She smiled as she said this. Haruno Sakura. Naruto smiled back her, a wide, open smile. Nice to meet you Sakura-chan. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Sakura blushed again. That was how they had first met. Then flashback. The 2 had talked for a while, until an adult showed up and chased him off, yelling demon at him. Today Naruto had left his apartment to go to the festival, hoping he could go unnoticed and maybe find the cute girl again. He had bought one of the masks being sold before the festival, a mask of the Yondaime Hokage, and he wore one of his few outfits that wasn't orange. Everything had gone fine until he finally managed to stumble on Sakura by accident. She had been standing by a group of adults, most of whom had pink hair like she did, looking nervous. She had on a bright pink yukata and had a sakura blossom tucked behind her left ear. Naruto snuck close and whispered in her ear. Finally found you, Sakura-chan. Sakura nearly jumped at hearing the voice of the cute boy she had met the other day. Why you were looking for me? She questioned softly, turning to face him. She could practically see his smile shining through the mask he wore. Of course Sakura-chan. I got jazzed away the other day before I had a chance to ask you if you want to be friends. Naruto stopped speaking and after a few seconds Sakura realized he was waiting for a response. Yes, I'd like that. Sakura blushed deeply as Naruto pushed his mask up, revealing his bright smile. Unfortunately he didn't get a chance to say anything else as nearby someone spotted him. It's him, it's the demon. It was all his fault. Get him. Naruto didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to Sakura as he leapt away, trying desperately to get away from the mob on his trail. Sakura watched as he disappeared, wondering why all the adults were chasing after him like he was some sort of monster. Now Naruto had been evading the mobs for over 3 hours, and night had fallen. He stopped in the dark alley and bent over, catching his breath. A sudden crinkle of paper caused him to look up. In front of him in the alley stood a tall-headed figure. Before Naruto could move to escape the figure performed a quick hand seal and spoke quietly. Pain. Dikakyu no Jutsu. Naruto screamed as he felt himself being burned alive as the fireball engulfed him. The last thing he saw before he passed out was the eyes of his attacker. They were red, with 3 black tomos spinning in them. Hokage's office, 3 hours later. Hiruzen Sarutobi was not pleased. Sitting in front of him were 3 Konoha shinobi. One held barely restrained fury in check by clenching and unclenching her fists continually. One showed no emotion on his face, but Sarutobi could tell the man was angry. The third sat nervously between the first 2, his Anbu mask sitting in his lap. Finally, after letting the third shinobi stew for long enough, Sarutobi spoke. I trust you know why I asked you here. It wasn't a question. Morino Ibiki nodded, his face grim. Mitarashi Anko growled. And the unmasked Anbu swallowed. Earlier this evening Uzumaki Naruto was brutally attacked. He was found by Anbu after having been burnt in an alleyway. Luckily for the Anbu who didn't even learn about the attack until 20 minutes after he had been lit on fire, Naruto has survived and is resting in the Konoha General Hospital. Unlucky for you, however, I have been informed that this was not the first time his guards have been late showing up to intervene when the boy was attacked. Sarutobi frowned as the man began to frantically try to explain why his men were occasionally late getting there. After about a minute of hearing excuses, Sarutobi shared a look with one of the many Anbu who were flanking the man. Enough. Kamizuki Surugasa, as I am sure you are aware, having received all records relating to this assignment when you replaced Hada Kakashi, the Anbu were late only once, while Kakashi was in charge of his protection. The man who was late showed up only after Naruto had been beaten by a group of drunken villagers. Do you know what happened to that man, Surugasa? Surugasa swallowed and shook his head no. All his records showed was the man had been pulled from duty. Sarutobi leaned further forward. He spent the next year as Ibiki and Anko's plaything. Hamazuki Surugasa had only been this scared one other time in his life. When the Kyuubi no Kitsune had been about to step on him. Unfortunately for Surugasa, he would not be saved by the Yondaime this time. His fellow Anbu dragged Surugasa out of the room as he cried and begged the Hokage to have mercy. Ibiki followed still frowning. As the doors to the office closed behind Ibiki, Sarutobi turned his attention to Anko. So what is this request of yours, Anko? Sarutobi asked, taking a puff on his pipe to calm his nerves. Anko grinned as she leant forward. Sarutobi hated it when she grinned like that. It always meant tons of paperwork for him. The Noha General Hospital, 2 days later. The first thing Naruto became aware of was a bright blurry light. Then slowly figures began to take shape. He blinked. Naruto was laying in a bed in the Konoha General Hospital. His entire body was wrapped in bandages and he was hooked up to several monitors. Glancing around the room quickly, Naruto noted 2 Anbu standing by the door and a third ninja lounging in a chair next to the window, absent-mindedly chewing on some dango as she looked out at the sun, bored out of her skull. Ugh, I feel like I was run over by a truck. Naruto muttered as he tried to sit up. Every part of him felt sore. Then he remembered what had happened before he passed out and suddenly he was trying to tear off his bandages. None of the ninja were fast enough, but they were all shocked when within seconds a very naked and very healed Naruto was standing before them. Looking down at himself, Naruto muttered. Well, at least the damage healed. Hey Gaki, you should get some clothes on. Naruto looked up. The source of the voice was the dark-haired Kunoichi who had been eating the dango. She wore a tan trench coat, a miniskirt and a mesh top and she wore a Konoha Hitai-8 proudly displayed on her forehead. Huh? Why? I'm in a hospital room, not in public. Being 6 years old, Naruto had no concept of modesty. Naruto had expected the woman to get angry with him, as most adults did. He was surprised when she instead started laughing and turned to one of the Anbu. Haha, I like the Gaki, Kakashi. I think he and I will get along just fine. Naruto's curiosity at what this strange woman meant was instantly forgotten as he realized who she was speaking to. Kakashi Nai-san. Naruto practically dove at the Anbu in the Inu mask, nearly knocking him over. The Anbu chuckled. It's good to see you too, Naruto. When I heard that the Anbu assigned to guard you had mysteriously lost track of you, I tried to track you down, but someone else got to you first. Kakashi grinned behind his mask. He hugged Naruto back. As much as he attempted to cultivate a cool and collected exterior, he had always had a soft spot for his sensei's son. The little boy, prankster that he was, had the same openness and honest love of life as his old teammate Obito, and he had sworn to nurture that in him in honor of his dearly departed friend and sensei. Naruto hopped off Kakashi, frowning. Kakashi-sensei, I didn't really get a good look at whoever did this to me. Did Anbu catch them? It was the Kunoichi who answered the little Gaki's question. No. I actually caught him performing the Gakakyu on you, but I had a choice between going after him and trying to save you. I think you'll agree that I made the right choice choosing to save you, Gaki. She grinned at Naruto. To Naruto, her grin was unnerving yet at the same time comforting. Naruto smiled back for a moment and then frowned. Well, I did see one thing about him. He had these really strange eyes. Anko and Kakashi both straightened up. Altered eyes were rare and usually meant a taijutsu. Naruto, do you think Yukao described that person's eyes to me? Kakashi asked hesitantly. Yup. Naruto said as he plopped down on his bed. They were red and had 3 black dots spinning in them. Kakashi and Anko both shared a look, both of them frowning. After a second, Kakashi removed his mask, revealing his Hitai-8 to be pulled down over his left eye. Naruto, if you saw this man's eyes again, do you think you could recognize them? Naruto nodded. Yup. I've never seen anything like them before. Kakashi sighed and pulled his Hitai-8 up. When he opened his left eye, Naruto gasped and scrambled backward on his bed. Kakashi's eye was red and 3 black tama were spinning in it. Naruto-kun, did your attacker's eyes look like this? Naruto nodded from behind the bed. Kakashi sighed and pulled his Hitai-8 back down over his eye. It's okay, Naruto, you don't need to be afraid. This eye was transplanted into me during the last war with Iwa from my dying teammate at his request. It is a Kekai Genkai of his clan. Kakashi saw the second Anbu perform a hand signal and he nodded. In a gust of leaves, the Anbu was gone, off to report to the Hokage that the attacker had been identified as an Uchiha. The Hokage's office, 1 hour later. What? A healed and energetic Uzumaki Naruto sat in the Hokage's office, sitting between Mitarashi Anko and Hada Kakashi. He was currently staring at Sarutobi in disbelief. What do you mean Anko is going to adopt me? I thought everybody but you and Kakashi Nai-sen hated me. Hiruzen Saratoi sighed. It was times like these that made him regret what he had had to do to protect Naruto. And it seemed that even the measures he had taken were not enough. Not if a member of the Uchiha clan had taken the risk of attempting to murder him. While yes, most of the people in this village may have hatred for you in their hearts, you must understand that it is in no way your fault. Naruto frowned. Then why do they hate me? Sarutobi sighed. He had been hoping to have this talk when the boy was a few years older. Before he could speak, Anko spoke up. Before you try to tell Naruto a little white lie to make his life easier, you need to understand that I'm only adopting the Gaki if he is told the truth. Sarutobi looked to Kakashi for support, but finding none he sighed. Naruto, before I begin, I need you to understand that I did what I thought was best and safest for you at the time. 6 years ago, on October 10th, the Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked Konoha. Hiruzen Sarutobi spent the next hour explaining to Namikaze Naruto his true heritage and about the demon he kept locked safely away inside of him. October 12, 6 years after the day of the Kyuubi. In the heart of Konoha sits a large clan estate, one of the 3 largest in the city. Situated between the clan compounds of the Hyuga and the Akamichi, it had been locked and sealed for the last 6 years and relatively empty for several years prior to that. Now Uzumaki Naruto, recently informed that he is also Namikaze Naruto, stood in front of the sealed gates that had not been opened since the Yandame's death 6 years ago. Standing with him were Hiruzen Sarutobi, Hada Kakashi, Mitarashi Anko, Hyuga Hiashi, Akamichi Chauza, and a squad Anbu handpicked by Hada Kakashi and Marino Ibiki. As Sarutobi unrolled a scroll and placed it against the gates, there was a bright flash of light. The gate slowly creaked open as the seals Sarutobi had placed on the compound to protect it until Naruto came of age were broken, leaving only the seals that Minato and his ancestors had layered around the compound, protecting it from intrusion. "Welcome, Naruto, to your new home," Sarutobi said as he stepped out of the way, waving the young Namikaze heir forward. Namikaze Naruto stepped forward in awe as he entered his ancestral home for the first time, watched by those who would call him friend. Hiruzen Sarutobi took his seat at the head of the Konoha Village Council. He was flanked by a pair of Anbu, as well as by Marino Ibiki, all of whom remained standing. He was not looking forward to this meeting, as he was certain the council would be in outrage once the truth of recent events were revealed to them. Sitting around the table were 35 other people, the clan heads or representatives of Konoha's 36 prominent clans. Nearest the Hokage sat Sarutobi Akemi, Hyuga Hiashi, Hada Kakashi, and Mitarashi Anko. Sarutobi could tell from the look several council members were shooting Anko that they were wondering what Orochimaru's old apprentice was doing sitting at the council, but the only answers they received from her or the others near her was that she was there in an official capacity to represent a clan. This understandably confused some council members and worried others, as all currently recognized clans, with 2 exceptions, were already represented at the table. Finally Sarutobi spoke. As many of you are aware, a young child was attacked and burned alive 2 nights ago, during the festival of the Yondame. If it had been anyone else they would not have survived, but Uzumaki Naruto's regenerative capacity enabled him to survive his injuries. Sarutobi noted that while many members of the council looked shocked or distressed by this news, far too many had cold looks on their faces, including Danzo and Uchiha Fugaku. What you don't know is that thanks to Uzumaki Naruto, we now have an idea of where to search for the attacker. We know which clan he belonged to. Sarutobi noticed looks of surprise on the faces of most of the council members, including Uchiha Fugaku. Beside him, Mitarashi Anko kept her gaze focused on him, eyes alert for any sign that Uchiha Fugaku was aware of who the attacker had been. After allowing the council to stew for a few moments, Sarutobi continued. The attacker has been identified, beyond a shadow of a doubt, as a member of the Uchiha clan. The council chambers were filled with an uproar. The shouts ranged from questions of how did they know this was true to outrage that the Hokage was accusing the Uchiha clan of housing a murderer based off the testimony of the demon to Uchiha Fugaku's adamant denial that the demon must be lying. Sarutobi clasped his hands and leant on the table, waiting for the outcry to die down. Behind him, Ibiki and the 2 hand-chosen Anbu watched Uchiha Fugaku like hawks, watching for any sign that the man was aware that the attacker had been a member of his clan. Finally, when the outcry had finally diminished, Sarutobi spoke again. Not only was the jutsu used Kaiten Gakakyu no Jutsu, which the Uchiha clan is known to favor and excel at, but before he was burned Uzumaki Naruto saw his attacker's eyes. His attacker had the Sharingan, fully evolved. There was a second round of outcry, but Sarutobi's turn glare silenced the council almost immediately. Uchiha Fugaku. As clan head of the Uchiha clan, it is to you I present this order. Every single male Uchiha with a Sharingan is to report to Anbu headquarters for interrogation. Marino Ibiki will preside over this investigation. Several members of the council stood and yelled, outraged that the Hokage would treat a clan in such a manner, just over the demon. Anko took close count of which clans these were. Uchiha Fugaku however remained sitting. As you command, Hokage-sama. The remaining military police will arrest and present to the Anbu any member of the Uchiha clan who refused this order. Uchiha Fugaku did not look pleased. Now, on to other business. As of this afternoon Uzumaki Naruto has been adopted. Until he turns 18 Mitarashi Anko is his legal guardian. As the boy's guardian, she is also his proxy as head of the Uzumaki and Namikaze clans until he comes of age. Thus she, or her proxy, will sit on the council for the Uzumaki and Namikaze clans. There was again an outcry as members of clans stood, raising complaints over these actions. Sarutobi noted that Uchiha Fugaku, who had once been a supporter of the cries for the child to be killed, was remaining silent. Enough. Because of the events of October 10 Uzumaki Naruto has been informed of who his father was. As he now has an official guardian, tasked with raising him and protecting him, Uzumaki Naruto has been granted the name Namikaze Naruto, as is his right, and this afternoon the Namikaze estates were unsealed, returned to the Yondame's son, as is proper. This time there were several grumbles, but no one wanted to aggravate the Hokage further on this matter. Also, I will be hand-picking an Anbu squad to provide protection for Minato's heir, so that events like the night of the 10th will never occur again. Sarutobi stood up, ignoring the various mutterings about the demon, and exited the council chambers, flanked by Ibiki and the two Anbu. As soon as they were out of the room Ibiki stepped up beside him. I was watching Uchiha Fugaku closely, Hokage-sama. He was genuinely surprised and dismayed when you announced that it was an Uchiha had attacked the boy. Despite his hatred towards the boy, I believe that he had no involvement in the attack. While I feel he may hate the boy even more after being humiliated like this, I fear the Uchiha responsible has more to fear from his own clan leader than from me. Given who was telling him this, that was saying something. Back in the council chambers various groups of councillors were talking, most muttering about the demon being given status. In one corner of the room Hyuga Hiashi, Aburam Shibi, Sarutobi Akemi, Akamichi Chauza, Nara Shikaku, Yamanaka Inoichi, Hada Kakashi, and Mitarashi Anko stood in quiet discussion. So you are to be the boy's guardian then? Shibi inquired, having not been present during the afternoon's opening of the Namikaze estate. Anko grinned back at him. While the Aburam leader did not show any reaction, it can safely be assumed that he was as unnerved by her grin as most other people were. That's right. But I insisted that Sarutobi tell the boy everything because I'm not raising the Gaki if he isn't aware of his heritage. Besides, I think it will be interesting raising the Yondame's son. The Gaki is gonna be a real lady killer when he grows up though. He clearly got his father's looks. Anko grinned again. Everyone around her shuddered slightly. They were all thinking the same thing. The Gaki may have survived being burned alive, but will he survive Anko? October 13th, 6 years after the day of the Kyuubi. Sakura sat on a bench in the park, swinging her legs and looking around. She was hoping to see her new friend Naruto. After the adults had chased him away the night of the festival she had worried about him, but after 3 days of waiting, she hadn't seen hide nor hair of him. She was really starting to worry. Hey, big forehead. I thought I told you not to come here again. Sakura looked up to find Kitsumi and Kazumi looming over her, surrounded by a half-dozen of her lackeys. Sakura fought not to cry as the two girls reached out to grab her. Half an hour later a young blonde girl picking flowers came upon a group of other girls picking on a crying girl with pink hair and a large forehead. She instantly got annoyed. Hey, leave her alone. Ino stormed up to the girls. When the leaders of the posse tried to confront her she just slapped them hard across the faces. You're despicable. Imanka Ino stood raging as she watched the girls run off. After a moment she turned to face the crying girl. Hey, I'm Ino. What were those girls picking on you for? Sakura looked up, trying to wipe the tears from her eyes. In between sobs she answered Ino. They pick on me because of my big forehead. Sakura started crying again. Ino looked at her for a moment before nodding. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pink ribbon she had brought to tie a bouquet together for her mom. Ino knelt down and tied Sakura's hair up with the ribbon. Stepping back she admired her handiwork as Sakura stopped crying. There. Just wear this ribbon and it will draw attention away from your forehead. Ino grinned at Sakura as she started smiling faintly. Anyways, as I said before, I'm Ino. You wanna be friends? Sakura smiled and nodded her head rapidly. She couldn't believe her luck, she had made 2 friends in 1 week. Sakura and Ino walked off together, Ino leading Sakura towards her family's flower shop. No sooner had the 2 young girls disappeared around the bend than did Naruto appear from the opposite direction, frantically searching around. Where is she? I expected I'd be able to find her in the park, I'm sure she must come here often. Naruto muttered to himself. His search for Sakura was interrupted by the sound of a whistle. Naruto stood bolt upright and then turned around slowly, nervousness visible on his face. Standing behind him was the imposing figure of 18-year-old Mitarashi Anko, a dark grin on her face as she towered over him. "We weren't done, Gaki. We have a lot of shopping to get done before we start your training, and I'll be damned if I let you make it take any longer than necessary." Naruto swallowed as his new guardian picked him up and shunshined away. That was the closest Namikaze Naruto would come to Haruno Sakura for the next 2 years. September 2nd, 8 years after the day of the Kyuubi. The entrance to the Konoha Ninja Academy was busy beyond belief. It was the first day of the new school year, and the members of the new first-year classes were all excited as they were led by parents or siblings through the academy gates. As Sakura and Ino walked through the gates together, followed by their mothers, they began taking stock of their new classmates. They saw several Inyazuka in one corner, congratulating a young boy and a young girl for getting into the academy. They saw a small timid Hyuga girl being escorted by a young woman with red eyes. They saw Ino's friends Shikamaru and Chaoji lounging with their fathers nearby, one pair chowing down on chips, the other pair staring up at the clouds. Then they saw the Uchiha. Uchiha Mikoto and 2 of the other Uchiha mothers stood proudly with their children, their poses radiating arrogance. Standing beside them were Uchiha Kitsumi and Uchiha Kazumi, who arrogantly smirked at those around them. Standing between the 2 girls was an equally proud, though not quite as arrogant, Uchiha Sasuke. "Oh my god." Ino cried out excitedly. "It's Sasuke-kun." As soon as Ino's cry rang out, almost every girl in the immediate vicinity who, prior to that point, had been too wrapped up in their own families to notice, swamped the small gathering of Uchiha. Uchiha Sasuke, whose older brother had fled the village a couple years before after murdering his best friend Shisui, was the single most sought-after boy their age. Practically every girl their age in Konoha had a crush on him. "Wah! Ino, where are you going?" Sakura yelled after Ino as she ran towards the crowd of girls swamping the Uchiha. Sakura crossed her arms and sighed. She had tried to see what Ino saw in Sasuke, but for the life of her she couldn't see it. He was aloof, rarely smiled, and always seemed to be brooding over his brother's betrayal of the clan. No, every time she tried to look at him, or any boy for that matter, as a possible romantic interest, one person's image kept overlaying itself in her mind. Happy, bright, cheerful, kind, caring. Naruto had represented everything she wanted in a guy, and even though she hadn't seen him in nearly 2 years, she still had hope that she would see her first true friend, and her first and only crush, again. "Alright everyone, listen up." A tall chunin with a red bandana wrapped around his head called out from the entrance of the building. "I am Daijin Hideki, and I am the overseer for all first-year students. If you will all follow me, we will get your children checked in and assigned to one of the 3 first-year classes." Hideki turned and entered the main academy building. The crowd of parents and students swiftly followed. As the last trailing family entered the building, 2 more figures arrived on the academy grounds, flanked by a pair of Anbu. The taller of the 2 figures was a dark-haired woman. She was dressed in a mesh shirt and a miniskirt covered by a tan trench coat. Her hit-eye was firmly tied to her forehead, and around her neck dangled a small necklace with a gold flame charm on it. The shorter of the 2 figures was a young blonde boy, about 7 or 8 years old, with blue eyes and 3 whisker-like scars on each cheek. He wore black pants with orange stripes down the sides, black sandals, and a mesh shirt. Over this he wore a tan trench coat, but unlike the woman his had a motif of flames on the bottom of it, similar to the cape the Yondaime Hokage had been known for wearing. His spiky blonde hair was kept mostly in check by a black headband with a gold flame symbol on it, and around his neck, a necklace similar to the woman's dangled. "Well Gaki, this is it. Time for you to shine." Mitarashi Anko said, grinning down at her son. Naruto grinned back up at her. "Of course mom. Just remember, just because I'm in the academy now doesn't mean you are getting out of training me." Naruto's grin deepened as Anko started laughing. Still laughing and grinning, the pair entered the academy. Hideki's speech had been informative but relatively boring. By the time he had finished, most of the new students were anxious to get to their classrooms and meet their new classmates. When he finally released them to go to their assigned classrooms, there were 2 types of behaviors displayed. The first was those students who immediately rushed out of the room, racing to find the classroom they had been assigned. The others were taking their time, giving their families one last hug before they followed the first group. Namikaze Naruto fell in the first group. "Don't be too much trouble for your teachers, Gaki," Anko said as she hugged her son. "We don't want to give the teachers heart attacks too quickly after all." Naruto grinned back up at Anko as she let him go, his grin a perfect match of hers. If anyone who knew Anko had seen it, they would have run for their lives. Naruto turned and ran out of the auditorium, heading for classroom 1A. "Squee. It's Asuka Sakura. He's in our class. This is so awesome." Ino cried out. Sakura just cried. Following Sasuke into the room were Kitsumi and Kazumi, her perpetual tormentors. Thanks to Ino, Sakura was safe from the two girls when she was around. But the evil little girls practically stalked Sakura at times, waiting for her to be alone so that they could pounce. Sakura put her head down on her desk. Why can't Naruto be here? I miss him. Sakura thought despondently. Shanro. Naruto needs to get back here so he can be ours. Inner Sakura replied with more energy. Because her head was down on her desk, she failed to see when Namikaze Naruto entered the room, looked around, and then walked up the steps to take an open seat at the back of the room. She also failed to notice the muted mutterings that began around the room as the few people were paying attention recognized the blonde boy. The Hyuga girl with pale lavender eyes blushed as Naruto walked past her, while the bulky Akamichi boy handed him a bag of chips as he passed by, grinning. After a few more minutes, the door to the classroom opened and in walked a relatively young Chunin. He had a distinctive scar across the bridge of his nose and brown pineapple spiky hair. I am Yamino Iruka, and I will be your teacher this year here at the academy. All the chatter ceased as soon as Iruka began speaking. In the back of the room, a blue-eyed blonde began sizing his new instructor up. This year we will be focusing on the history of the shinobi lands, the basics of taijutsu and weapon use, as well as more customary subjects such as math and science. Iruka heard a few scattered mutterings at the last part of his statement. Now, why don't you all stand up and introduce yourselves? Tell us a little bit about yourselves. How about you? Iruka was pointing at a young boy with a hairstyle similar to his. The kid looked up from his desk with a bored look in his eyes and muttered troublesome before he stood up. My name is Nara Shikamaru. I like clouds, sleeping, and shoji. I dislike people who wake me up. Shikamaru sat down as soon as he finished and placed his head back down on his desk. The introductions went around the room while Naruto sat patiently in the back, paying attention to the details of his classmates. He would need to be 100% aware of his surroundings in order to pull his pranks off most effectively. Finally, the introductions reached a girl with pink hair who Naruto could tell was a Haruno. Seeing her, he was reminded of the events that had led him to learning who he really was. He shuddered involuntarily as his mind briefly remembered the horrible sensation of being burned alive. My name is Haruno Sakura. I like pink things, nice people, and a certain boy I met 2 years ago. I dislike people who are mean to other people for no good reason. Naruto's jaw dropped in disbelief at his luck. 2 years he had been trying to find her, and now his first true friend ended up in his class. It was too good to be true. But wait, she said she likes a boy. Naruto instantly became depressed as he figured that meant he didn't have a chance of catching her attention again. I knew it. I knew I should have pushed harder when the Haruno clan refused to let me speak with her. Naruto spent the next several minutes so depressed that he didn't hear when it was his turn. Naruto, Naruto, Naruto. Iruka's shout caused Naruto to practically jump out of his seat in confusion. Naruto, will you please introduce yourself? Naruto blinked before he realized where he was. Collecting himself, he stood up, thereby giving the girls in the class a clear view of his bare chest through his mesh shirt. My name is Namikaze Naruto. I like training, ramen, dango, my adoptive mother, and learning new techniques. I dislike people who pick on other people for no good reason and people who insult me or try to kill me. Around the room, hushed whispering began as soon as Naruto said his name. Those he could hear were talking excitedly about having the Yandame's son in their class. Sakura practically blanked out after she turned to see who was speaking. He was a bit older and dressed differently, but it was him. The boy she had missed for nearly 2 years. When Naruto finished and sat back down, he looked out over the class. He saw a number of girls looking between him and Sasuke, probably evaluating which one to go after. He saw several guys, including Sasuke, evaluating him as a possible rival. Whether for girls or in class he couldn't distinguish. Then he caught sight of Sakura staring at him with a blank look on her face. He smiled and winked at her. Class was put on hold for half an hour as Iruka sought to wake up Sakura after she passed out stone cold on the floor. Sakura waited outside the door to classroom 1A, waiting for Naruto to exit. She feared what he might think of her after 2 years without seeing her, but she held hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd still be interested in her. You better not be waiting for my cousin like all those other girls, forehead. I refuse to allow someone like you to date him. Sakura turned around in surprise, coming face to face with a glaring Kitsumi. Why would I be interested in an Uchiha, Kitsumi? You are all nothing but arrogant bullies. Sakura replied angrily. Oh, you little that's it. Kazumi, Aiko, grab her. We'll teach her what we do to upstarts. The two girls flanking Kitsumi reached out to grab a hold of Sakura as she attempted to back away from them. Sakura's heart skipped a beat as she bumped into someone behind her, momentarily fearing that it was another of Kitsumi's lackeys. But the hands that took hold of her shoulders were much too firm to belong to one of the girls in her year, and the way Kitsumi and the others had suddenly stopped in their tracks and stared told her that it definitely couldn't be one of their friends. Why, you're him. You're the Yandame's son. Kitsumi said in a shaking whisper. In her eyes Sakura could see a mixture of awe, lust, and calculation. Yes, I am. And you are? Sakura nearly fainted again as she realized that it was Naruto who was holding her shoulders to keep her from backing up. He's touching me. Shanro. I'm Kitsumi. She said confidently, sticking her hand out to shake Naruto's. Kitsumi Uchiha. Sakura felt Naruto's hand suddenly tighten on her shoulders. She saw Kitsumi hesitate and the other two girls took a step backwards with confused looks in their eyes. Sakura turned to face Naruto, surprised herself to see him clenching his jaw. Did you just say Uchiha? Naruto practically growled, his eyes cold and piercing. Kitsumi nodded, her confidence shaken. Yes I did. Naruto's growl deepened for a moment before he straightened and made a visible effort to calm himself. When he opened his eyes the smile that Sakura remembered from 2 years ago was on his face as he turned to face her. So, Sakura-chan, I'm sorry I haven't seen you in a while, but your clan elders refused to allow me to meet with you. Sakura blinked, still in slight shock that her crush was actually speaking to her. So, this guy you said you liked. Any chance I'll be able to compete with him? Naruto had a grin on his face, but Sakura could see genuine concern in his eyes. Or is he the Uchiha team in our class? Sakura heard 3 gasps from behind her when Naruto insulted Sasuke. Kitsumi started speaking angrily, but Naruto pointedly ignored her. Sakura sputtered for a few seconds before finally finding her voice. Of course, all she could say was the following. Squia. And Naruto promptly found himself staring up into Sakura's eyes, a victim of a Sakura's first kiss. June 1st, 12 years after the day of the Kyuubi. Class 5A was extremely excited. Today was the day of their final exams and if they passed they would receive their Konoha Hittite and become Shinobi of the Leaf. What had started out as a group of over 120 students had been narrowed down to barely more than 30. There were members of the Akimichi, Nara, and Yamanaka clans sitting in a row. There were 2 loud Inuzukas and a quiet Aburam, as well as a soft-spoken Hyuga girl. There were 3 Uchihas, clustered together and surrounded by various boys and girls, hoping to capture their affection. And then there was a pair sitting quietly in the back of the room. To the untrained eye it simply looked like the 2 were studiously working on homework. To those who knew these particular 2 well, it was just another reason to worry. Haruno Sakura was one of the smartest students in the class and excelled in calculations. Namikaze Naruto was one of 2 geniuses of the shinobi arts in the class and had a prankster spirit like no other. Add to this the sadistic tendencies he picked up from his adopted mother and you had a devastating prankster. Combine the 2 and you get a teacher's worst nightmare. The 2 genin candidates had been an official couple for a few months, but they had been extremely close for several years before that. Many girls in the class had vied for Naruto's affections as he was the sole heir to the Namikaze name and fortune and to many of the conniving bitches, Sakura's personal pet name for them in the academy, he was the single most eligible bachelor. Even after he and Sakura officially became a couple many girls continued to attempt to steal him away from her. Most notable of these was Kitsumi Uchiha, who not only refused to take no as an answer, but seemed to ignore the fact that Naruto despised the Uchiha clan, despite him having repeatedly made it clear to her that he despised her clan, a clan that produced murderers. Since the suspect had never been caught, Naruto viewed members of the Uchiha clan with attitudes ranging from suspicion to outright disgust. He viewed Sasuke with a healthy rivalry, considering him one of the few Uchiha worthy of his notice, as the boy cared more about improving his skills than the vendetta some of his clan seemed to have towards him, and because the boy had been hurt by a member of his own clan, his brother. He viewed Kazumi as a sycophant and he distrusted her with all his might. And was utterly put off by Kitsumi's continued advances on him. Kitsumi on the other hand was determined to become the most powerful woman in Konoha and she viewed snagging the son of the Hokage and a member of the honored Namikaze clan as the first step in that goal. Of course, she never could get Naruto alone because if he wasn't with Sakura he was with his mom and even the Uchiha feared Orochimaru's apprentice. 30 students were passed, each of them proudly bearing their Konoha Hittite as they exited the academy into the throng of excited and proud parents. As Naruto and Sakura exited hand in hand they were both smiling with grins from ear to ear. They had passed and were now officially genins of Konohagakure. Seeing his mom standing, a suspicious amount of space open around her, Naruto quickly kissed Sakura on the cheek before dashing off. Sakura giggled when her boyfriend got within a foot of Anko and suddenly the 2 disappeared. She was well versed in their habits by now and knew that their idea of celebrating would be a no-holds-barred sparring match across Konoha on their way home. Still smiling she sought out her own mother to tell her the good news. Within the Konoha business district, in a basement, behind a false wall, lies a hidden facility, abandoned when Orochimaru fled Konoha. Within this facility sits a chamber with a self-regulating stasis pod. Within this pod sits a single large egg. In the silence of the chamber, a room that had not been opened in 15 years, a single crack appeared in the side of the egg. June 1st, 12 years after the day of the Kyuubi. Two Anbu sat on top of a restaurant in the middle of Konoha. They sat drinking tea quietly as across the rooftops in the distance the pair of Konoha shinobi fought violently as they streaked across the city. Whoosh. Two more Anbu appeared behind the first two in a swirl of leaves. Taking the cups of tea the first to proffered they two sat, sipping slowly and watching the fighting in silence. On the rooftops in the distance they watched as the two shinobi switched from simple to jutsu to using kunai and other weapons. Whoosh. Two more Anbu appeared, blinked, and shrugged before joining their fellows for tea. After 6 years, Anbu knew better than to interfere when Mitarashi Anko and Namikaze Naruto were celebrating. "Mom. I'm home," Sakura announced loudly as she set her bag on the couch in the living room as she entered. "Welcome home, dear. How did it go today?" Sakura's mom called back from the kitchen. Sakura could hear the sounds of her mom baking, her favorite pastime when her husband was away on a mission. She smiled and made sure her hit I-8 was tied securely before she waltzed into the kitchen. "Why don't you see for yourself, Mom?" Sakura said, smirking as she crossed her arms and leant against the doorframe. She knew her mom disapproved of her boyfriend, so Sakura always used mannerisms she picked up from him when she was home to remind her mom that she needed to just accept that she was in love with Naruto, or as the rest of the family called him behind closed doors, the demon brat. The first time she had heard a member of her family call her boyfriend, that after Naruto had finally told her about his prisoner, the man had spent 3 weeks in the hospital. The official report said it was surgery to fix a hernia. The family knew it had really been a testicle retrieval operation. "Oh honey, you pass. I'm so proud of you." Sakura's mother smiled and paused in her mixing to give her daughter a one-armed hug. Sakura smelled peanut butter as scents from the bowl with the cookie mix wafted beneath her nose. She was also pleased to note that her mom seemed to have finally accepted the fact she was with Naruto, since she hadn't gone off on her about imitating him. "Thanks, Mom. Are those peanut butter cookies I smell?" Sakura asked with a cheeky grin. Peanut butter cookies were her favorite. They were also Naruto's favorite, but her mother had never given the boy enough of a chance for her to have learned that. "Yes, they are, dear. I know you have a date tonight, so I thought I could make yours and Naruto's favorite and you could take them with you for dessert." Sakura blanched. "Mom, how do you know they are Naruto's favorite?" she asked warily. Her mom looked up from her bowl with slight confusion on her face. "I just asked his mother, dearie." Sakura's mom sighed. I ran into Naruto and his mother while I was shopping this weekend and had a very illuminating conversation. I'm sorry I've been so disapproving of you and him. I know that if I had given him a proper chance in the beginning, I'd have seen what a nice boy he really is." Sakura blinked. "Mom, are you underage in jutsu or something?" Sakura's mom blinked. "No honey. Why would you think that?" Never mind." Sakura spun and exited the kitchen quickly, heading upstairs to take a shower and get ready for her date. "Hold still Gaki so I can put the damn bandage on. Geez, I'm impressed. Most genin would be wimping out in pain after taking a wound like this." Anko muttered as she bandaged Naruto's forearm. Sitting on the table next to them was a kunai completely coated in Naruto's blood. Anko had just removed it from Naruto's forearm after Naruto blocked it straight on in order to get a winning blow on Anko in their celebration. "But Mom," Naruto whined. "You know I'll be fully healed in less than an hour. And besides, none of those other genin grew up raised by you." Naruto stuck his tongue out at his mom, but he promptly drew it back as she sliced at it with a kunai. "Back. Mom. Careful. I've got a date tonight." Anko finished tying the bandages around Naruto's forearm and he hopped up out of the chair, spinning his arm a few times to stretch it out. "Thanks, Mom. Now I've gotta go get ready. Sakura will expect this to be perfect." Anko chuckled as her son ran off down a long hallway towards his room. In the 6 years since the Namikaze estates had been unlocked, Naruto and Anko had settled on a routine. There were 30 trusted servants who had been hand-picked by Anko, as well as a 24-hour-a-day Anbu squad assigned to guard the compound. Every week Anko and Naruto would move to a different house in the complex, while the servants would begin repairing the previous house and preparing the next house in the sequence. They had arranged the schedule so that they used the main house, which was a veritable mansion with its own walls and defensive seals, during major holidays and other events. This was so that they could hold parties during such periods that included, but were not limited to, Naruto's birthday, Christmas, and New Year's. Thus Naruto running off to his room was not a simple few-second dash down a hall it might have been. No, this involved Naruto racing through an improvised obstacle course Anko had set up through the house to keep him always on his toes. No one could ever claim things were never interesting with Anko around. Within the Konoha business district, in a basement, behind a false wall, lies a hidden facility, abandoned when Orochimaru fled Konoha. Within this facility sits a chamber with a self-regulating stasis pod. Within this pod a single large egg used to sit. Said egg was currently scattered in 1,000 pieces on the floor of the chamber, along with a large portion of the glass that made up the stasis pod. A trail of fluid lead to a vent, into which a black scaled tail with tiny gold scales dotting it was just disappearing. Sakura and Naruto stared into each other's eyes. They saw passion and fire and intensity and focus. They saw desire to end all desires. Hi! They both cried out as one. Splat splat. Sakura blinked. She had barely taken 3 steps before Naruto's perfect shots had hit her. One smack dab in the center of her chest and one smack dab in the center of her visor. Curse you Namikaze Naruto. She railed as she chased after the disappearing shinobi as he vanished further into the trees, her paintball gun locked and loaded. Water, mold, rodents. The scent of discarded trash and little sunlight. A small being thinking these turned, taking a new pathway through the vents of the old building it was seeking to escape. Its first priority was food and water. Then it would follow the rest of its instincts. 2 hours later, hot, sweaty and coated with paint, the 2 teenagers stumbled out of the front gates of Extreme Ninja Paintball. They leant against each other, Naruto with his arm around Sakura's waist, Sakura with her head on Naruto's shoulder, and they grinned. It had been months since they had been able to come play paintball, since they had been so busy preparing for the Genin exam. So now that they finally had a chance to have a date again, there had been no question as to what they were going to do. "God Naruto, I can't believe you beat me so badly," Sakura said as they walked slowly towards Ichiraku Ramen. It wasn't the fanciest restaurant, but the owner and his daughter genuinely liked Naruto, and AM had the cutest stories about when Naruto was little. Sakura could sit there for hours and snuggle with Naruto while he ate his favorite food with nary a care in the world. The only thing she liked better were when she could trap him on his couch and have her wicked way with him. Of course, being 12 meant that really only involved kissing and a little bit of hand roaming, but still, she had her dirty thoughts at times. On this particular night the happy couple was unfortunately interrupted shortly before they could reach Ichiraku. They heard them before they caught sight of them, but unfortunately they didn't have enough time to escape. Around the corner came Kitsumi, Kazumi, and their horde of followers and admirers. While most of them had ultimately dropped out of the academy after discovering they just didn't have what it took to be a ninja, they still followed Kitsumi and Kazumi around like they were goddesses. "Oh, Naruto dear, there you are," Kitsumi said in her fakey sweet voice. "I've been looking all over for you. My family is having a big dinner tonight to celebrate Sasuke, Kazumi and I passing our Genin exams. You would be doing me a great honor if you would be my date, Namikaze Naruto." Kitsumi winked and made a formal curtsy. Naruto fought to keep his disgust from his face. Sakura didn't waste so much effort. "I'm sorry, Kitsumi, but Naruto and I have plans tonight. Maybe next century," Sakura said in a fakey sweet voice herself, sticking her tongue out at Kitsumi when she finished. Without even bothering to wait and see their response, she turned and kissed Naruto passionately on the lips. While the girls were distracted in outrage at this action, she felt Naruto's grip around her tighten in preparation. Whoosh. Kitsumi and her posse were knocked to the ground as a vortex of wind formed around Naruto and Sakura, launching them into the air. The girls were too busy staring in surprise and anger as Namikaze Naruto and his girlfriend flew away in a spinning funnel of wind to notice the 2 grinning blonde figures in the alleyway promptly disappear in puffs of smoke. Having fed well for several hours, a noticeably larger than when it was born black snake with gold-flecked scales slithered slowly through the back alleys of the Konoha business district as the sun slowly set. Despite the coming night the viper was happy as the weather was nice and warm out and ground retained the heat well. Scenting with its tongue it sought desperately for that hint of otherness that it had been born to seek. Suddenly it caught the scent it was searching for. It was faint but clear. "He's here." Slowly, the black and gold viper changed direction and began heading for more populated areas of the city. Sakura and Naruto were currently sharing a meal with their sensei, Iruka. They had run into him on the way to Ichiraku's, and despite his disapproving of their constant pranking escapades in class, he still had a soft spot for Naruto. So now the 3 were sitting and talking, enjoying a nice meal between friends. Iruka kept making little cracks at Naruto and Sakura about their relationship, and Naruto in turn ribbed Iruka for having a crush on Naruto's mother. Sakura pretended to sympathize with Iruka when he turned bright red at the mention of Anko. "Serves the pervert right. Go Naruto inner," Sakura chanted. Sakura had developed the secondary personality back when she was always being bullied, but once Naruto had re-entered her life, she had needed it less and less. Now it only popped up when she actively hid her real feelings on a matter. The trio were almost done with their meals when a sudden shouting behind them surprised them. "Ah, it's a monster. Somebody call the Anbu." All three stiffened and spun in their seats, expecting to see some drunk imbecile pointing at Naruto. When this happened, Sakura invariably had to restrain her boyfriend to prevent him from beating the crap out of the offender. Nearly being burned alive had broken something in Naruto, and it pained Sakura when she saw the pain in his eyes, but she knew that there was nothing she could do except be there for him when he needed her. But the man who had let out the cry wasn't even looking anywhere remotely near Naruto. Instead, he was fleeing northward in terror, fleeing from a 15-foot-long black viper that was swiftly moving along the street, flicking its tongue out every few seconds. "It's scenting," Naruto said softly in wonderment. Both Sakura and Iruka looked at him in confusion. "Tasting the air. Its sense of taste and smell far surpass our own. I wonder what it's looking for." As if in answer, the snake paused and raised its head into the air, looking directly at the three. Sakura silently cursed not bringing any weapons on her date. Iruka drew several kunai and crouched. But Naruto merely stood and calmly approached the snake, almost as if in a trance. "Do I know you?" he said softly as he approached the serpent. The viper lowered its head until it was level with Naruto's face, and the two beings stared into one another's eyes. Suddenly Naruto's eyes went slitted for a moment and information locked inside his na, and the na of the viper unspooled in his mind. Naruto blinked rapidly for several seconds before focusing on the snake before him again. "Lachesis," Naruto spoke softly, promptly before collapsing. As he fell towards the ground, Naruto heard Sakura and Iruka's faint cries of Naruto just before blackness claimed him. Unknown time, unknown place. Naruto was floating. All around him was darkness. A darkness so profound that not even the faintest hint of light survived. He felt nothing. A complete absence of all senses. No sight, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch. Just nothing. He floated for what felt like an eternity and yet could have been only an instant. Finally, just when he thought he was losing his mind, a tiny light appeared in the distance. It was red and glowed faintly, flickering in the nothingness. Naruto tried to swim towards it and slowly the light grew closer. As it did, a strange world began to take shape around him. After what felt like another eternity, but could not have been more than mere moments, the world around Naruto changed from nothingness into a jungle, lit by a brilliant blood-red full moon. He found himself sitting on a rock as the jungle around him was filled with the sounds of wild life. "Where in the nine hells am I?" Naruto asked of no one in particular. He was startled as a large white rabbit hopped past him, disappearing into the underbrush. The rabbit had been carrying a pocket watch and wearing a tailcoat. Naruto knew he shouldn't have gone to sleep last night after watching Alice in Wonderland and eating a bean and cheese burrito. Crack. Naruto spun. Standing about 15 feet away from him at the edge of the clearing was a tall, pale, thin man. His long black hair glinted in the moonlight and Naruto could see that his eyes were green and slitted like a snake's. Well, what do we have here?" The man spoke, his voice joined by a hissing undertone like a snake. "Who are you?" Naruto asked warily. The man ignored his question. "Yes, a viable candidate. A very viable candidate indeed. The body is strong, the transformation quick. There is only one thing remaining." Naruto stepped backward as the man's neck suddenly elongated, his jaw unhinged, and he struck forward to bite like one of the snakes Anko kept. But just before the man could close his jaws around Naruto's neck, a golden barrier flashed, blowing him backward. Naruto blinked and fell backwards in surprise, staring as the man's neck retracted and he shook his jaw out. "Damn. What the hell was that? That should not have happened. No child's mind is protected like that," the strange man muttered, clenching and unclenching his jaw. "That is where you are wrong, intruder." Naruto leapt to his feet and spun around. Behind him stood a 10-foot-tall red fox with 9 tails. The creature had a spiked golden collar with a seal inscribed on it latched around its neck and tiny flames flickered around its body and tails. "The child's mind is protected by the same power that keeps me bound inside him," the fox continued, his voice low and growling. "Something as weak and insignificant as you could never hope to affect his mind if even I, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, cannot touch it." Naruto scurried out of the way as the Kyuubi advanced, intent on the figure before him. The fox cocked his head slightly when he stopped, standing on top of the rock, looking down on the strange man. "Do I recognize this taint? I name you, Orochimaru, and by the power I yet control, I cast you out of this boy. His mind shall never be yours." Naruto watched in shock as the man screamed, his face a rictus of fury and pain, as a rush of foxfire rose around him, burning him to ash. A gust of wind arose and the ash was scattered into the night. Slowly the demon fox turned and faced Naruto, his jailer. "So, you are my host. I would say this was a pleasure, but I would be lying." The Kyuubi began laughing, a harsh barking sound that caused several birds to fly out of nearby trees. Naruto stepped backward, prepared to run if need be. Kyuubi noticed this and chuckled. "Relax, kid. I couldn't hurt you if I wanted to." Which trust me, I have, many times before. Before Naruto could react, Kyuubi dashed forward and swiped at Naruto with one paw. Clang. The Kyuubi's paw bounced off an invisible gold barrier with an almost metallic crash. You see? The power of the Shinigami keeps me sealed within you and prevents me from affecting your mind. Naruto picked himself up from where he had fallen on the ground and shook himself off. So what the hell is going on here? Where the hell am I, and who the fuck was that freak with the long neck? Kyuubi chuckled again. We are within the landscape of your mind, Kit. Such a vibrant place, so full of life and death. It has almost been worth being trapped within you to enjoy such a paradise of nature. Naruto just stared at the Kyuubi sullenly. Kyuubi chuckled when he saw Naruto's expression before he continued. As to why you are here, it is tied intimately in with who that man was. His name is Orochimaru, and he was one of the legendary Sannin of Konoha. What you just witnessed was a construct, part of a strange virus you have somehow become infected by. He was meant to infect your mind as well as your body, to force you to seek out Orochimaru. Naruto blinked in shock before he finally responded. What do you mean a virus? You mean that creepy asshole infected me so he could turn me into his servant? What kind of freaky fuck would do that? Kyuubi regarded Naruto with one red eye for a moment before replying himself. From what I heard from the snake boss Manda before I was sealed within you, Kit, a pretty fucked up one. He was apparently kicked out of some organization of freaks because he was too freaky. Naruto did not find that hard to believe at all. So if you've gotten rid of Orochimaru's effect, why am I still here? Kyuubi's grin deepened and he chuckled. For two reasons, Kit. First, I removed the part of Orochimaru's taint that would take over your mind, but the virus is still altering your genetic code. Your body is still transforming. Second. Kyuubi leaned in until his face was inches from Naruto's. Kyuubi was pleased to see Naruto stared back with confidence, showing no fear. You and I need to have a talk. Naruto's eyes narrowed. About what? June 3rd, 12 years after the day of the Kyuubi. Despite her usually creepy and sadistic behavior, Mitarashi Anko was actually quite caring when it came to her adopted son. She had not left his side once in the 2 days since he fell unconscious. Not when an entire squad of Anbu tried to move her so Naruto could be taken to the hospital. Not when an entire squad of medic nins came to examine the Namikaze heir. And not when a now 18-foot black snake curled up at Naruto's feet, calmly watching over him. This had at first perplexed and worried Anko, both because the snake was so clearly abnormal as well as extremely intelligent. When she had first tried to ward it off when it had somehow followed Iruka and Sakura, when they brought Naruto home to her, it had stopped and curled up, its head hovering and staring her straight in the eyes. When it finally became clear that it did not appear to bear any threat to her and the others, she allowed it to approach Naruto, keeping a watchful eye on it still. She had been amazed when it had slid up beside the unconscious boy and tasted along him, as if making sure he was okay. It had then promptly curled up at his feet and split the time between sleeping and simply watching the sleeping boy. Of course, while Anko was comfortable around such a clearly deadly snake, most others weren't. Of Naruto's friends, only his girlfriend Sakura had dared being within striking range of the snake. She had of course been scared to death at first, especially when the snake had slid up beside her and stared her in the eyes. But it left her alone after a few moments, almost as if it had sized her up and found her worthy. Sakura had spent as much time as she could at Naruto's side, usually spending long hours just leaning over him and staring at his face. She was anxious, worried that if he didn't wake up before team assignments, that he would be denied his status as a ninja. Given what they had tried in the past, she wouldn't, but it passed the village council to try to get Naruto's status revoked over something like this. So when Naruto suddenly sat bolt upright in his bed, his head collided with Sakura's with a resounding clack, nearly knocking the two teens out. "Aitai!" Sakura cried as she landed on her butt, rubbing the forming bruise on her forehead. Naruto on the other hand just blinked as the large snake rose up in front of him. "Hello Lachesis," he said softly as he reached out a hand. Anko and Sakura both stared in surprise as the snake leant forward and rubbed its head against Naruto's hand, much like a dog or cat would. "Naruto, are you alright?" Anko asked, a slight shudder in her voice. Naruto turned to face his mom as tears threatened to appear in her eyes. "Of course mom. Why are you crying?" Anko's answer was to embrace Naruto in a massive hug, holding him tight and crying. Naruto blinked and then turned his head as a second form wrapped him in a hug. "Hello, Sakura-chan." "Naruto, you idiot. I was so worried about you." Sakura cried as she clung tightly to her boyfriend, her tears soaking his shoulder. "She is good for use." Both Kunoichi turned their heads sharply in shock, to be greeted by the sight of the large snake's head, hovering a few inches away from Naruto, its tongue flicking out to taste the air. Naruto blinked. "Which one, Lachesis?" "The smaller female." Naruto smiled. Anko and Sakura kept looking back and forth between him and the talking snake. Anko had met summons that could speak, but she had never heard of a natural snake capable of human speech. "Well, I'm glad you approve, Lachesis." For years to come, Sakura would swear the snake had smiled at her. 2 hours, one lecture, and a shitload of ramen later, Naruto, Anko, and Sakura were all sitting in one of the lounge rooms off of the main hallway. It was still decorated from the party Anko had planned to celebrate her son becoming a shinobi. "So, you really spoke to him, Naruto?" Sakura asked, a mixture of awe and fear on her face at the thought of meeting one of the most powerful beings in the world. "Yeah. He tried to intimidate me a little bit, but I've spent so much time around Anko and her snakes, I could tell bluster when I heard it." Sakura snuggled against her boyfriend with his arm around her waist. She was so glad to have him back she was completely ignoring the huge venomous snake Naruto had called Lachesis. "You really had me worried, young man. But I'm proud of you for coming through well," Anko said with mock sternness. There was a loud ringing sound. Someone was at the front door. Anko stood with a sigh. "I'll bet that's Hokage-sama and the others. I sent for them as soon as you woke up. I'll just bet the delay was thanks to the fucking council." Naruto and Sakura snorted. They both knew how much Anko despised the council. Anko disappeared in a leaf shunshin, heading for the doorway. Naruto and Sakura snuggled for a few moments in peace before a high-pitched voice interrupted their happy moment. "Naruto-kun. I'm so glad to see you're alright." It wasn't the Hokage and representatives of the council. It was about 20 of Naruto's fangirls, all led by Uchiha Kitsumi. Naruto scowled and he felt Sakura's arms around him tighten. "I'm just fine, Kitsumi. Now will you please explain why you and your posse have barged your way into my house?" The Tuzumi feigned being taken aback. "Oh, Naruto-kun, you wound me. I only wanted to make sure that you were alright. Is there anything I can do for you?" Kitsumi said in her fakey sweet voice. Naruto made a show of seeming to think for a moment. But when he spoke, he had a prankster's grin on his face. "Lachesis, would you mind showing these lovely ladies to the door?" Kitsumi and the others stared at him, confused by his statement. They remained confused right up until a large black snake slithered between Naruto and them, its mouth open and hissing. "Eek. A snake." Most of the girls cried out in terror, turning and fleeing from Lachesis. In her defense, Kitsumi stood her ground until the snake reached her and reared up, staring her in the eye. "I am an Uchiha, not some scared little girl. If this was supposed to be a test of my dedication, Naruto-kun, I have clearly proven my mettle." Kitsumi crossed her arms and smirked, her gaze kept on the snake before her. Sakura scowled at the girl as Naruto smiled, seemingly genuinely. "Kitsumi, have you awakened your Sharingan yet?" Kitsumi looked at him and blinked. "No. Why do you ask, Naruto-kun?" Naruto smiled. "Oh, it's nothing. Lachesis, Muma no Hado," Naruto said quietly. Kitsumi blinked. "What was that, Naruto-kun?" Kitsumi asked. Lachesis and Naruto both ignored her as Lachesis began to wave back and forth for a moment, her eyes glued on Kitsumi's. Suddenly they began to glow with a swirling red and orange glow, and Sakura saw the same glow appear in Kitsumi's eyes. After a few seconds, Kitsumi blinked and turned, running from the room screaming in terror. She collided with Anko as she fled, still screaming her head off. Anko watched a terrified girl flee in amusement before turning back to the two teenagers on the couch. She absent-mindedly stroked Lachesis as the large snake slithered past her. She was still surprised by how friendly such a deadly snake could be. Even the toxic snakes she was careful around, as they could be unpredictable. But Lachesis seemed to be tamer than a newborn puppy. "Just what did you do to scare those girls so badly, Naruto?" Anko asked, a mischievous grin on her face. "Me?" Naruto said with an innocent look on his face. "I didn't do anything. Most of those girls freaked out when they noticed Lachesis, and the last girl fled after staring at Lachesis for a few seconds." Anko crossed her arms. "The truth, Naruto." Naruto grinned back at her. Lachesis used a genjutsu on her that made her witness her worst fear. Anko blinked. "That's pretty sadistic of you, Naruto. I'm impressed," she said with a grin after a moment. Naruto grinned back up at his mother for a few seconds longer before Sakura's desires got the better of her and she pushed Naruto down on the couch and started kissing him. The Hokage showed up an hour later and after much convincing Naruto sat still long enough for medic nins to examine him and for a member of the Yamanaka to confirm that there was no trace of mental control. Naruto had had a mischievous grin when Inoichi first witnessed the Kyuubi in his mind, but Kyuubi kept up his end of the bargain they had made and did not interfere with the blonde ninja. Now Naruto sat, surrounded by a squad of Anbu, 3 medic nins, the Hokage, and representatives from 8 clans. He had wanted Sakura to remain with him, but the Hokage had insisted that this be a closed meeting. "Yamanaka Inoichi assures me that you are free from any mental influence, or else we would not even be standing here." Namek is Naruto, in the absence of any evidence that what has been done to you has been detrimental, you are being cleared for active duty. You will report to the academy tomorrow for temp placement. You will also report to Inuzuka Izumi on a weekly basis to be evaluated. Is that understood? Hiruzen Sarutobi's look was firm but kind. It carried no malice, just the authority of his position. Naruto nodded, as did the large black snake that lay draped across his lap. It still made Sarutobi worry that one of his old students' creations was now bound to the heir of the man he chose to be the Yondaime Hokage instead of him, but for now there seemed to be no ill effects. From what Naruto had told him, the seal that kept the Kyuubi contained had also protected Naruto's mind from influence. Good. Now as to the second matter, you say this transformation left you with some knowledge of Orochimaru's? Sarutobi asked after taking a puff on his pipe. That's correct, Hokage-sama. I believe this was intended to create a hidden agent for him here in Konoha. I suspect I would have more knowledge, but thankfully the seal prevented him from altering my mind. As such, I only have the tiny bit of knowledge that it unspoiled from the genetic memory of the retrovirus. Sarutobi nodded. Good. Well, I will have a directive issued to Anbu to cooperate with you if you use the code phrase Serpent's Head. But you are only to use this if an Orochimaru-related threat has been found, understand? Sarutobi looked Naruto straight in the eyes. The young man nodded immediately in response. Very good. Sparrow, Hawk, we're leaving. The rest of you, thank you for coming. The 8 clan heads who had been brought to bear witness that Naruto was in fact fine and unaffected nodded their heads respectfully before turning and filing out of the room. Hiruzen Sarutobi sent Naruto a small smile before he left the room as well, smoking his pipe. Lachesis swiveled her head to stare at her master, who reached out and scratched her idly. You did a good job today, Lachesis. But we'll have our work cut out for training together if we want to be an effective team on the battlefield. Naruto stood and removed the bandages covering his right forearm, revealing the black summoning tattoo that had formed thanks to the retrovirus. He stared at it thoughtfully for a few moments before turning and walking out of the room. As he did so he flicked off the lights, dropping the room into darkness as Lachesis slithered after him. June 4th, 12 years after the day of the Kyuubi. Namekiz Naruto stood at the gates of the Konoha Ninja Academy and took a deep breath. He hadn't given it much thought the night before, but the virus of that freaky bastard Orochimaru had altered him physically as well as attempting to take control of his mind. This meant that getting dressed in the morning had presented him with a few new challenges. First of these were his eyes. They had become slightly slitted and taken on a green tint, changing them from their normal blue to a more turquoise color. They were easily taken care of by either wearing colored contacts or sunglasses. Since the colored contacts would take a few days to get, he had sighed and chosen a pair of sleek over-the-top triangular red sunglasses. They were a tad bit ostentatious, but he was hoping they would distract people from his eyes. Next he had to deal with the patches of scales that had formed on his body. He found that their presence reacted to his emotional state, so long as he didn't get too fired up, most of them were unnoticeable. Those that were noticeable all the time were on the back of his hands, so he just wore a pair of fingerless black gloves with an orange flame insignia on the back. Next he wrapped bandages around his right forearm to cover the tattoo that had formed there. He would rather not have anyone questioning such a strange tattoo after all, particularly since he hadn't had it that last time his classmates had all seen him. After thinking for a moment he had also wrapped his left forearm as well. He figured it would make people less curious. The final major change he had noticed he just couldn't do anything about. Inside his mouth he had grown a pair of fangs like a snake, retracted to the roof of his mouth normally, but capable of swinging down, so he could bite someone. He really hated that freaky bastard for this change, and it really creeped him out that his mother found it intriguing. "Su, this is your Schulz." Lachesis hissed from around Naruto's shoulders. Naruto had been surprised that morning to discover that Lachesis could change her size at will, within limits. He had quickly found it useful as she could shrink herself down to ride on him or be concealed in his clothes. Yes, this is his place. Now remember, behave yourself, Lachesis. As much fun as it was to scare those annoying fangirls off yesterday, I can't have you freaking out my fellow shinobi all the time. I understand. I will behave. Naruto grinned and reached up to stroke the black snake's head. Having finally had time to examine his new partner, he had noticed that the mostly black snake had a diamond patterning on her back comprised mostly of golden scales. Oh, don't you listen to him, gorgeous. You go right ahead and scare those conniving bitches all you want. They deserve it for trying to steal my Naruto-kun. Sakura snuggled closer to her boyfriend and kissed his cheek. Now come along, hun. We've got to hurry or we'll be late for our team assignments. I swear, if they assign me to a different team than Naruto, someone will be suffering a prank war. Sakura thought as she and her boyfriend walked arm in arm towards the entrance to the academy. Starting today you are shinobi of Konoha. Haruka said, winding down his speech. I will now announce the teams. Iruka shuffled some papers. Team 1. Naruto zoned out a bit as Iruka began reading off the teams. He was still chuckling over the reactions he had gotten to Lachesis. Shikamaru had just stared at it lazily before putting his head back down on his desk, while Chaoji had smiled. Shino had given it an apprehensive look, if any look he gave could actually be called anything other than stoic. Sakura's old friend Ino had shuddered and put several people between herself and the Black Snake. The two Inuzukas had been wary, but also a little intrigued. The three Uchiha had stared at Naruto, Kitsumi with fakey love in her eyes, Kazumi with resentment, and Sasuke with a calculating look. Hyuga Hinata had shuddered and sat down in her seat, scared by the Black Viper. She really is a sweet girl, Sakura thought as she snuggled against Naruto, she's just crushing on a boy who is off the market. Sakura was hoping the Hyuga heir would find a new crush because she would hate to have to hurt the girl. Team 7, Uchiha Sasuke, Namikaze Naruto, Haruno Sakura. Both Naruto and Sakura's ears perked up and they let out a cheer as they heard their names called. Sakura stuck her tongue out at a glaring Kitsumi as she sat back down and for the hell of it winked at Ino as well. She knew Ino was jealous that Sakura was on a team with her precious Asuke-kun. Team 8, Hyuga Hinata, Inuzuka Kiba, Uchiha Kazumi. Sakura was sorry to see Hinata teamed with Kitsumi's lapdog, but at least neither of them was teamed with her precious Naruto-kun. Team 9 from last year is still in circulation. Team 10, Yamanaka Ino, Akimichi Chaoji, and Nara Shikamaru. Naruto chuckled and Sakura glanced at him sideways. Later. He mouthed silently to her. Sakura returned her attention to Iruka. Team 11, Uchiha Kitsumi, Inuzuka Kid, Aburam Shino. Slam. Naruto noticed that Kitsumi's head had slammed into her desk when it finally sank in that she wasn't with Naruto. Now, you are all dismissed. Return here after lunch to meet your Jounin senseis. Dismissed. Iruka shuffled a few papers before leaving the room, followed by the other teacher Mizuki. Sakura noticed that Naruto had been staring at the man intently throughout the class. Naruto. What's wrong? I've never seen you look at anyone but an Uchiha that way before. Naruto frowned and narrowed his eyes. Naruto? Sakura asked hesitatingly, worried now. He glanced at her sideways as he clasped his hands together. Sakura, I'm going to go take a walk. Do me a favor and go pick us up some ramen. I'll meet you on the roof in 15 minutes. He said softly. Naruto leant over and kissed Sakura on the lips softly, hoping it would reassure her enough, at least for the next 15 minutes. Then he stood and walked out of the room, Lachesis sliding inside his trench coat and curling around his left arm. Naruto caught up to Mizuki outside the teacher's lounge about to follow Iruka inside. Mizuki-sensei, can I talk to you for a moment? Naruto asked congenially. Mizuki paused and smiled. Of course Naruto. What do you need? He asked as he turned around. Naruto saw Iruka stop and he shared a brief look with him. Iruka nodded and entered the teacher's lounge. Well, I was just wondering, where did you get that tattoo on your arm? Mizuki blinked, slightly surprised. It was something my old teacher gave me, but he died before he could finish it. Why do you ask? Naruto's answering grin was feral with a touch of the sadism he got from his mother. Because I recently received my own tattoo from him and I didn't realize anyone else he had taught was here still. Mizuki blinked, taking this in. After a moment he spoke. Come with me Naruto. We can speak in private. Mizuki turned and walked down the hall towards an unused classroom. Unnoticed by him, Naruto performed a quick series of hand seals. On the roof of the Konoha Ninja Academy, the Anbu assigned to guard the younger students nearly fell over in surprise as 40 copies of a certain blonde-haired menace suddenly appeared out of thin air. Anbu-san. Alert others, Serpent's Head. Namikaze Naruto is capturing a student of Orochimaru's. Bring medic nins and the strongest anti-venoms in stock. One of the clones said, turning to face the man. But that said 40 clones split up, each heading for a different point around Konoha. As Mizuki closed the door Naruto took a look around the dimly lit room. Finding no threats he turned around and leaned against the wall. So, you've met Orochimaru-sama then. Show me the gift he gave you. Mizuki said, his voice suddenly harder. Naruto grinned and began unwrapping the bandages around his right forearm. As he did the tattoo there was slowly revealed. When he saw it Mizuki whistled. Orochimaru-sama really gave him something special. Mizuki thought. Impressive. But how do I know you got that from Orochimaru? Mizuki asked, his eyes still glued to the tattoo. Naruto grinned. Lachesis. He spoke softly. What was that? Mizuki asked frowning. Naruto's grin deepened. Strike. Mizuki dodged the first strike by a fraction of an inch, Lachesis's fangs slicing through his pants. Proof enough. Naruto asked as Lachesis retracted, growing to closer her normal length and wrapping herself around Naruto. Naruto stroked her head softly, his tongue flicking out and turning into a snakish tongue momentarily. Mizuki stared in shock. Orochimaru had once told him about some of his secret projects that he had left in Konoha, but he never thought he would actually see one, particularly not this one. Recovering himself quickly, Mizuki dropped to one knee. Orochimaru-sama, forgive me. I did not recognize you without your companion. Naruto's smirk deepened. Pathetic. Why Orochimaru ever chose to teach you I will never understand. Lachesis. Strike. This time Mizuki wasn't fast enough to dodge the strike, and Lachesis sank her fangs into his shoulder as Naruto watched, grinning coldly. As Mizuki cried out in pain and collapsed to the floor, the venom already going to work, he managed to stutter out a pained "Why?" Naruto stepped closer so that he could whisper in the man's ear. Tick-tock. Orochimaru isn't here, team, and I don't take kindly to those who would betray Konoha. Naruto's grin grew even colder as he straightened and turned, heading for the exit from the room. Better hope the medic nins get here soon, or there won't be a chance in hell of saving your life. Glaring at Mizuki with all the hate in his heart, Naruto opened the door and turned away from the downed Chunin, stalking into the corridor. Namikaze. Naruto headed off to find his girlfriend. Dealing with assholes always made him crave her company. Back in the classroom, Mizuki writhed around in pain as his left arm began to dissolve under the onslaught of Lachesis's venom. A few seconds later, 3 Anbu shunshined into the room. Shit. Sparrow said resignedly. This was going to mean so much paperwork. Imino Iruka sat at a desk in the teacher's lounge, going over the team assignments the Hokage had just given him. I don't know, Hokage-sama. Are you sure about rearranging the teams like this? He asked, looking up at Hiruzen Sarutobi. Sarutobi took a puff on his pipe before replying. I am sure, Iruka. It is my firm belief that the students will benefit more from being with these instructors. Even if the students themselves might not agree at first. Hiruzen Sarutobi chuckled. Iruka's head dropped. Your son isn't going to like being told he's being assigned a different team. He asked for the Inoshikacho trio specifically. Iruka said resignedly. My son needs to be pushed, as do the members of the Inoshikacho trio. This arrangement will do that. Sarutobi replied, smiling. Iruka just shook his head and reshuffled the papers. He was dreading the reaction when he told the new Jounin instructors that their team assignments had been changed. June 4, 12 years after the day of the Kyuubi. Naruto found Sakura sitting impatiently on the roof of the building. She had 2 steaming containers of ramen beside her, all but forgotten as she tried pointedly to ignore their third teammate, who had followed her to the rooftop. Naruto had a friendly rivalry with Sasuke, true, but his eyes narrowed as he realized that Sasuke was attempting to flirt with his girl. Naruto decided to be diplomatic since he was likely going to have to be teammates with Sasuke for quite a while. You wouldn't be trying to pick up my girl, now would you, Uchiha? Naruto asked, hard-edged humor in his voice. Sasuke had the good manners to look embarrassed as he turned to face Naruto. You can't blame a guy for trying, Namikaze. Sakura is one of the best kunoichi in our year and quite attractive. Sasuke shrugged his shoulders. I know. Naruto said as he walked up to Sakura, smirking. But she isn't with me because I am one of the best. She is with me because we've liked each other since we were 6. Sasuke blinked at that revelation. For all the rumor-mongering that went on in their academy classes, that was one fact that no one had ever mentioned. Sasuke just shrugged again. Oh well, even if I can't have her, at least I'm on a team with you too. Kami, I would hate to be stuck on a team with my cousin. She's such an arrogant team it surprises even myself sometimes. Sasuke said as he laid back on a bench and stared up at the clouds, chuckling. Naruto smirked and kissed Sakura lightly before taking the container of ramen she had handed him. Well, she's always been stuck in her own little world of superiority. You at least got a wake-up call from your brother. Otherwise I would never have considered you a rival. Sasuke looked at Naruto in confusion and blinked. What does my brother turning into a murderer have to do with anything? Sasuke asked in confusion, his eyes narrowed. Naruto smirked again, his eyes twinkling behind his sunglasses. It means that as far as I'm concerned, the entire Uchiha clan, sans you and Itachi, are my enemies. Sasuke glared at Naruto. What the hell is that supposed to mean? The Uchiha are one of the most prestigious clans in the village, so why the hell would the Namikaze view them as enemies? Sasuke was starting to get angry now, but Naruto still showed no hint of dark emotion on his face, nor allowed it into his voice. Sakura's hand on his arm squeezed slightly. It's really quite simple, Uchiha. A member of your clan tried to kill me 6 years ago. By burning me alive. If it wasn't for a special power I've had since birth. Sakura snickered at Naruto's bending of the truth. I'd have died in that inferno. But instead I survived and my legacy was revealed to me by the Sandaime. Since then I have viewed all Uchiha with disgust and caution. The only exceptions are Itachi, who I had met several times before he killed his cousin and fled Konoha, and you. Naruto turned to look at Sasuke, smirking at the shocked look on the Uchiha's face. And you are an exception only thanks to your brother. I know your brother told you that the arrogance the Uchiha clan holds, their superiority, will only lead to conflict with the rest of the village and that it will be their downfall. And I know that your attitude has been different than other Uchiha. Otherwise I wouldn't have given you a second thought when we first met and just considered you an enemy too. Sasuke, who had stood in shock at the revelations, sat down, hard. How do you know what my brother said to me that night, Namikaze? How the hell do you know? Sasuke's fists were clenched and shaking. He had never told anyone the words his brother had spoken to him that night. Naruto's smirk left his face and his voice darkened. Because my mother and I helped smuggle him out of Konoha. I know far more about what happened that night than you do. I know why Itachi killed his cousin Shisui and I know the real reason he left Konoha. He told us when we helped him make good his escape. Naruto took a breath for a moment and noted that Sasuke's fists had unclenched and he had a look of surprise and thoughtfulness on his face. And you can tell no one about this Uchiha because if it gets out that Itachi revealed his mission to anyone, our lives, all of our lives, will likely be forfeit to cover up the secret. Sasuke's look became grim as he closed his eyes and absorbed everything he had just been told. When he didn't open his eyes or move after a few seconds, Naruto shrugged and opened his ramen, joining his girlfriend in enjoying one of his favorite foods. Line break. Morino Ibiki sat in his office, contemplating the news that he had just received. Less than a day after he had been commissioned, one of Ibiki's agents had managed to discover and disable one of Orochimaru's spies. Ibiki wouldn't have believed it if he hadn't seen it for himself. The Konoha Ninja Academy was considered a prime target for enemy attack, and since he became head of Anbu's interrogation division, Morino Ibiki had instituted certain precautions. He had a full-scale surveillance system installed, as well as tripling the Anbu assigned to perimeter guard. Thus, when Namikaze Naruto had confronted Mizuki, Ibiki had been able to watch the entire confrontation. He had to admit, this punk kid of Anko's had certainly picked up her skill in torture. The venom he had injected Mizuki with had left the blue-haired Chunin more than willing to sell out his master. Grinning, Ibiki closed his computer and stood, exiting his office flanked by a pair of Anbu as he went to begin the interrogation of Mizuki. Line break. When they returned to their classroom after lunch they found that they were the last ones to arrive. Most of the other teams had already gathered in little groups, although Naruto was pleased to see that the remaining open spot in the back of the room was nowhere near teams 8 or 11. As the members of Team 7 walked up the stairs towards the back, Naruto and Sakura glanced to the side, taking stock of the dynamics forming amongst the other teams. After noticing their behavior, Sasuke joined in as well. They saw that the Ino Shikacho trio were lounging by the windows, with Chaoji eating chips, as usual, Shikamaru watching clouds, as usual, and Ino being bossy, also as usual. Sakura snickered. Ino may be her best friend, but she wouldn't have wished the bossy chick on anyone. Behind them they saw Team 8, with Kiba blustering loudly. They noticed that Hinata seemed a little sad, while Kazumi, ever the sycophant, was playing to Kiba's ego. Naruto liked the dog user, he had even joined him and Sakura on some pranks in the past, so he made a note to warn Kiba about Kazumi's devious nature. He wouldn't wish one of the two Uchiha Kunoichi on anyone, even his worst enemies. On the other side of the room he noticed the ever-silent Shino appeared to be trying to ignore his two teammates, who were arguing over dominance like a pair of Inuzuka pups. Kid had proven to be an eminently capable Kunoichi, but her ability to focus in class had cost her, leaving her dead last in the rankings. Katsumi on the other hand had done everything she could to ensure she had the highest scores in the entire class. Naruto and Sasuke could both have beaten her, but they both cared more about training and learning jutsus than bookwork, so their test scores were merely average at best. Finally they reached the empty seats in the back of the room and settled in. Sasuke noted that his two teammates immediately removed books from their pockets that seemed to be filled with calculations and diagrams. Curious, he leant over to take a look. "What's that you've got there, Namikaze?" he asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Naruto's face lit up with a prankster's grin. "These are our prank books. My mom taught me a jutsu that binds them together, so what is written in one appears in the other. We use these to plan out all the pranks we've pulled over the years. Like that time Katsumi's underwear appeared hanging from the ceiling." Sakura chuckled loudly at the mention of that prank. It had taken 3 months of research and practice, but she and Naruto had finally gotten the jutsus needed just right. The end result had been forcing Katsumi's underwear to air shunshin up to hooks the two pranksters had stuck in the ceiling the night before. Sasuke just blinked. That was you too. The entire Uchiha compound was in an uproar for a week over the stain on Katsumi's honor that had been made. How the hell did you two wiggle out of getting punished for that? Naruto smirked, but Sakura put her hand on his arm. Turning to face her, Naruto saw that she was grinning, so he nodded and let her explain. "Well, it's simple really. No one had any proof that we were involved, and I mean, come on, have you ever heard of someone forcing another object to shunshin without using a kawarimi? Add to that the fact that even if the Uchiha had accused us of the prank, the Hokage would have dismissed the accusations out of hand. After all, your clan did try to kill Naruto. No, your father, Fugaku, likely stopped the clan from raising any actual issue over it in order to keep them from getting in more trouble for scurrilous accusations. Sakura grinned triumphantly as she leant back in her seat. Sasuke just blinked. Damn. You guys really are good. But then why is your bookwork only so-so? Sasuke asked, confused on how they could be so brilliant with pranks and not excel in class. Naruto smirked. Because we spend all our time training and pulling pranks, that's why. Sasuke snorted and sat back in his seat. At least his teammates were skilled. The student spent the next half hour just relaxing and chatting before Iruka entered, followed by the first of the instructors. Teams 1, 3, and 4 all left with their teachers, lowering the noise level decidedly. About 10 minutes later another batch of instructors arrived, drawing a gasp of surprise from Naruto. Mom? What are you doing here? Everyone in the room stopped their discussions and turned to look. Sure enough, standing with a group of 2 other instructors was the feared Midarashi Anko, ex-apprentice to Orochimaru of the Sannin, known to her enemies as Serpent's Fang. The entire class instantly shuddered and crossed their fingers, hoping to Kami that she wasn't their instructor. I'm supposed to be a Jounin instructor Kaki. Why else would I be here? Now, which of you ripe young shinobi is Team 10? Anko began going eeny meeny miny mo around the room until she stopped with her finger pointing straight at Ino. Ino swallowed and slowly raised her hand. That would be us, Midarashi-san. She said softly. Even Ino was afraid of Anko. Anko grinned. Most genin in this situation would have passed out at the realization that she was their instructor. But Ino had actually volunteered the confirmation that they were her students. Well then come along Gakus. We have training to get to. Meet me in the park on the west side of the academy. You have 5 minutes. But that said Anko disappeared in a leaf shunshin. Taoji finished off a bag of chips before standing and following a worried Ino out of the classroom. Shikamaru followed slowly behind, his hands in his pockets and an utterance of troublesome upon his lips. In the back of the classroom Sakura and Naruto were embracing one another, laughing their heads off. Sasuke looked at them and snorted. Baka. Little did Sasuke know just how terrifying a drill instructor Midarashi Anko could be. Well, now that outburst is taken care of, I will introduce the remaining 2 instructors present. Haruka said, trying to get the attention of a class that was still shaking with fear. This is Yuhi Kurenai, the Jounin instructor for Team 8. Sasuke noted that the members of Team 8, including his cousin Kazumi, all seemed relieved to have a more normal-looking instructor, even if the brunette Kunoichi's eyes appeared to have a red tint to them. And this is Sarutobi Assuma. Haruka continued. Naruto recognized the man from a party at the Hokage's tower a few weeks before. As usual the man was smoking a cigarette and seemed to have a laid-back attitude. Naruto wondered who was going to get him for an instructor. Who will be the Jounin instructor for Team 7? Haruka finished. Naruto blinked. He saw Assuma mutter something to Haruka, who merely shrugged and shook his head apologetically. Okay you 3, come on. We better get started if we want to get anything done before the end of the day. Assuma said, motioning for the 3 genin in the back to follow him. Naruto swallowed and stood, swiftly following Assuma. Sakura and Sasuke both blinked for a second before standing and following the blonde out of the room. As Naruto passed Assuma the older man matched his stride to Naruto's and spoke softly so only he could hear. My old man told me about what happened, Naruto. If you'd rather keep the changes secret from your teammates I'll understand. I won't mention them unless you do first. Beside him Naruto nodded his head in acknowledgement of Assuma respecting his privacy on this matter. All shinobi had secrets after all. Assuma led his new team to a small cafe near the academy where he sat down and ordered a cup of coffee and some dumplings. Naruto chuckled to hear Assuma muttering to himself about his father changing teams on him. Naruto and Sakura both ordered some dango, while Sasuke ordered smoked fish. Finally Assuma sighed and spoke. Okay, so, why don't we get to know one another? I'll start. I'm Sarutobi Assuma. I like cigarettes, shoujin, and women. Assuma took a drag on his cigarette, his silence clearly indicating that one of the 3 genin should introduce themselves. Naruto chuckled and shrugged. I'm Namikaze Naruto. I like training, my adoptive mother, my girlfriend Sakura, dango, and my familiar Lachesis. I dislike people who bully others, traitors to Konoha, and people who try to attack or kill me or my precious people. Assuma noticed Sasuke wince at the last part of Naruto's announcement. Given what his father had told him about the night Naruto was attacked, Assuma began to worry that he would have a conflict on his team. The pink-haired girl with her arms wrapped around Naruto spoke up. I'm Haruno Sakura. I like training, pranks, and my boyfriend Naruto. I dislike people who bully others and anyone who dares threaten my boyfriend. Asuma had expected Sakura to glare at Sasuke after the last part of her introduction, but instead she merely smiled and kissed Naruto lightly. Sasuke on the other hand merely looked embarrassed. Sighing, Sasuke finally spoke up. "My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I like training, mastering my family's traditional jutsus, and my teammates. I dislike traitors, those who pick on the weak just because they are stronger, and my cousin Kitsumi." Asuma blinked. Naruto and Sakura had both sent Sasuke a look of friendship and respect as he spoke. Maybe his team wouldn't be such a problem after all. Further discussion was forestalled as an attractive waitress arrived with their orders. After a minute the four began light discussion as they enjoyed their meal. When they had finished their light repast, Asuma spoke up again. "Alright, so, now that I've gotten to know you all a little bit, we can get down to business. You all have the rest of the afternoon off. I want you to meet me at Training Ground 3 tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Bring all your ninja gear, but don't eat any breakfast. The training will be pretty intense, and I don't want you three vomiting on your first day as genin." Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura all nodded in acknowledgement of Asuma's orders. Asuma stood and paid the bill before walking off, a cigarette between his lips and his hands in his pockets. Back at the table, Naruto and Sasuke shared a look. "Well, he's better than some of the other jounin I've met. He may seem laid back, but he's really a strong jounin," Naruto said with a shrug of his shoulders. "He'll certainly be a more attentive instructor than my brother Kakashi. He is always too wrapped up in those orange books of his to teach me anything." Sasuke looked at Naruto in confusion. "Brother? I thought you were an orphan." Naruto chuckled, but it was Sakura who answered. Ada Kakashi is a brother figure to Naruto. He was one of Naruto's father's students and has looked out for Naruto since he was born. I've met him a few times. He's apparently a really strong jounin, but he is also notoriously unreliable," Sakura said cheerfully. Kakashi may have been unreliable, but he had always made her boyfriend smile brighten. "Well, I guess if you two vouch for him, this Asuma guy must be worth our attention," Sasuke said as he stood and stretched. "I'm going to go get some training in since we've been given the rest of the day off. I'll meet you two in the morning." Sasuke idly waved goodbye as he turned and walked off, heading off towards the Uchiha compound. Naruto chuckled, but it was cut off as Sakura forcibly turned his head and kissed him deeply. When she pulled back, she stared into Naruto's eyes, still holding his face. "Now, dear, tell me what you did with Mizuki. I noticed he didn't return with Iruka, even if no one else did," she said, firmly but softly. Naruto chuckled and removed his sunglasses, revealing his turquoise eyes. "I didn't think it was possible, but his eyes are even more beautiful now," Sakura thought to herself as she gazed into Naruto's eyes. "Well, dear, simply put, I ensured that he would never be able to betray Konoha again," Naruto said, his voice chill. Inside his coat, Lachesis hissed as she slithered along his arm and wrapped around Sakura for a moment. "Hello, Lachesis," Sakura said softly, letting a hand drop down and stroke the snake. "Hello, Sakuras. Did I miss anything while I slept?" Lachesis hissed. Naruto and Sakura both chuckled. "No, Lachesis," Naruto said. "You didn't miss anything at all." June 5, 12 years after the day of the Kyuubi. The members of Team 7 met at 7:45 the next morning just outside Training Ground 3. As soon as they entered, they were greeted with the sight of Sarutobi Asuma sitting on top of a large boulder smoking a cigarette. "You're early," he remarked as he took another drag on his cigarette and let out a puff of smoke. "Of course, sensei," Naruto said, smirking. "Who do you think I am? Kakashi?" Asuma chuckled. "Touché, Naruto. Well, since you are all here early, I don't see any problems with beginning your final test early." Asuma's statement was rewarded with the image of Sakura looking for all the world like a deer in headlights, Naruto smirking and taking a bite out of an energy bar that he had suddenly pulled from his pocket, and Sasuke blinking in surprise. "What the hell do you mean final test?" Sasuke yelled in outrage. "We already passed our exams. What the hell do you think you are up to?" Asuma chuckled and dropped his cigarette to the ground, putting it out with his foot. "Those tests were all just to determine if you have the capacity to become genin. It is this exam that will determine whether you are really ready to be one though. Those of you who fail will have the option of either returning to the academy to be recycled into next year's graduating class or of retiring and becoming civilians." Sarutobi crossed his arms, smirking at his sullen student. Naruto, he noticed, didn't seem surprised in the least. "Damn that Anko. I bet she told him about the test just to spite me. The rules of this test are simple. There are 3 bells. I am carrying one on my person, while the other 2 are hidden somewhere in Training Ground 3. You have until noon to each acquire a bell. When noon rolls around, those of you who have succeeded in acquiring a bell will be truly granted the rank of genin, and you will get to eat lunch. Any of you who have failed to acquire a bell will be tied to a post and forced to watch while your teammates eat. You will also have failed the exam and will, as I said, have to make a decision as to whether to try again next year or just give up." Assuma grinned and hopped down from the boulder. He took out a timer and set it down on the boulder, turning it on as he did so. "Team 7, your final exam begins now." Assuma had disappeared as soon as he had announced the start of the test. That was over an hour ago, and the members of Team 7 were still sitting in the clearing next to the boulder. "So, I think if we can acquire the first bell by working together, finding the other two will be a breeze thanks to this," Naruto was saying as he made a notation on a fresh page of his prank manual. Then Sasuke's and Sakura's lap's identical books flipped to a new page and revealed the new symbols being copied onto them as well. "But Naruto, you still haven't explained how you'll be able to find the bells in the middle of this terrain," Sakura said, looking up from a reply she was absent-mindedly writing on the notebook. Next to her, Uchiha Sasuke gaped and sputtered as he read what she had written. "Naruto. So we are agreed then. We use the scare shitless mixed with thousand fears to distract Assuma while I sneak in and steal the bell." Sakura. Maybe. I still think we should go with a plan involving Sasuke in a dress though." Naruto looked down and snorted. "Well, dear, let's just say that Lachesis, and by extension myself, have a couple of tricks to aid in tracking," Naruto replied, his tongue flicking out and going split like a snake's momentarily. The blonde prankster grinned at his two teammates. Sasuke flipped back to the previous page and double-checked part of the plan. After a few moments he nodded thoughtfully and closed the book. "Okay, I think we are ready team. Let's go get us some bells," he cried out as he stood up. "Yosh." Naruto and Sakura both said as they rose to their feet as well. Still grinning, 3 Genin turned and disappeared amongst the boulders. A couple hundred meters away Sarutobi Assuma was lounging on top of another rock smoking a cigarette when he sensed 3 chakra signatures approaching. They were clearly trying to remain hidden, but they were no match for the Jounin senses. Finally the figures stopped about 20 meters away, but only for a moment. Suddenly he sensed 2 of the chakra signatures circling in opposite directions, surrounding him. Chuckling, Assuma stood up. Only to wish he hadn't. He had been so focused on the strong chakra signatures of his students, he had forgotten to keep an eye on the signatures of animals around him. Surrounding the boulder he stood on, in all directions, were several thousand large, black with gold patterning on their scales, snakes. As one the snakes raised their heads and hissed at him before surging forward. "Oh shit," Assuma thought as his cigarette fell from his mouth. Assuma attempted to use a kawarimi at the last moment as one of the snakes struck at him. The snake's bite instead impacted a log and the snake vanished in a puff of smoke. Somewhere in the boulder field a larger version of the snakes that were chasing Assuma chuckled to herself as she got the memories of her displaced clone. "Sweet gots it's." Another clone hissed as it slithered up to the original. Jingle. A single gold bell dangled from the snake's mouth. Lachesis hissed in pleasure. "Boots works. Takus it to master." Lachesis hissed at the clone. The clone bobbed its head before slithering off to find Naruto. Lachesis turned her attention back to where Assuma had moved to and hissed, directing her clones to continue after him. It wouldn't do for the Jounin to realize they had stolen the first bell already. Wouldn't do at all. Meanwhile, Naruto's 3 Cage Bunshin, 2 using a henge to appear like his teammates, waited patiently, their chakra signatures a decoy for Assuma, while the real Team 7 waited for Lachesis to deliver the first bell. That was the key. The metal of the bell would give off a peculiar taste in the air, something that Lachesis could track. Incidentally, so could Naruto. "Where is that snake of yours, Naruto? Shouldn't it have been here by now?" Sasuke muttered as the 3 Genin sat in the shade of some larger boulders. "She will be here shortly. Just be patient, Sasuke," Naruto replied calmly. He stood and stretched just as a snake slithered around one of the boulders and dropped a bell into his hand. Naruto grinned as both Sakura and Sasuke stood. "1 down, 2 to go," Naruto said, his eyes narrowing. Naruto's tongue flicked out and tasted the air around the bell before sliding back into his mouth. The snake Bunshin did the same. After a few moments the two separated and began tasting the air. After a few moments Naruto stopped and grinned, his tongue returning to his mouth. "I've got one. Sakura, you come with me. Sasuke, go with the snake Bunshin. Meet back here once you've recovered your target," Naruto said as he crouched, his tongue flicking out periodically. Despite the fact they were technically on a mission, Sakura couldn't help the thought seeing Naruto's tongue gave her. "Oh man. I wonder what he can really do with that tongue of his," she thought, blushing slightly. They may have been only 12, but Sakura's interest in the other sex was already at the level of a teenager several years older than herself. It took Sasuke and his snake escort all of 5 minutes to find the second bell. Sasuke smirked in triumph, and when he returned to the meeting spot, he was pleased to see that he had beaten Naruto back. Naruto on the other hand was having more difficulty. He and Sakura had traced the bell to a gravel field in the training ground, but he couldn't pin it down. To top it all off, his face was seriously itching, particularly on both sides of his nose. "So where is it, Naruto?" Sakura asked as she scanned the field, looking for any sign of the bell. "I don't know," Naruto admitted, removing his ostentatious sunglasses and scratching absent-mindedly at his nose. "And darn it, why am I itching so much?" Naruto scratched harder at his nose and his cheeks when suddenly the outer layer of skin sloughed off, revealing a line of golden-green scales that ran across the bridge of his nose. Naruto blinked as he felt the scales on his face, and he sighed dejectedly. He had been hoping the transformation had ended, but apparently there were still a few surprises for him. Almost as if on cue, his eyes suddenly felt weird and the world began to shift in and out of focus, the colors shifting from what was really there to a hazy spectrum of reds and purples. Sakura, who had been looking for the bell, turned and nearly screamed as she saw Naruto's face. Naruto's eyes were shifting from turquoise and mostly round to reddish green and fully slitted. "Sakura, what's going on? I can't see properly. The world keeps shifting," Naruto cried out as he dropped to his knees. Sakura rushed to his side and held him, staring into his eyes. Naruto tried to calm himself by breathing deeply and steadily, and slowly his vision stabilized. Finally Naruto closed his eyes for a few moments, and when he opened them again they were there, now, usual brilliant shade of turquoise. "Naruto?" Sakura asked her boyfriend quietly. "Are you alright?" Naruto nodded and swallowed before speaking. "I think so. That was so weird." The world kept shifting from appearing normal to being a bit fuzzy and appearing to be made of shades of red and purples. Naruto's voice trailed off as he remembered something his mother had been explaining the night before after she had made a full examination of Lachesis. Flashback. "Naruto, I know I've taught you about a lot of different snake species, but Lachesis here is different on so many levels. For starters, she has another sensory organ that most snakes lack. Those species that do are colloquially known as pit vipers, due to the little pits they have on their faces for receiving thermal images," Anko said as her son took a seat at the kitchen table. Naruto nodded as he absent-mindedly stroked Lachesis. For a snake, his new partner acted more like a cat or dog in her desire for attention. "What this means is that they can see the world in a different manner than we do. They see relative levels of heat in the environment," Anko finished. That's pretty cool, Mom. I guess that will come in handy when fighting opponents where vision is impaired," Naruto said. Next to him Sakura smiled politely and enjoyed her food. She wasn't nearly as interested in the biology of snakes as her boyfriend was, so she really hadn't been paying attention to his mom. Then flashback. "Oh my god. I think it's another part of the transformation," Naruto said, touching the new scales on his face. They felt differently than the ones on his hands and arms. Could the virus have somehow given him the ability to see heat? Well, there was only one way to find out. "Sakura, can you go stand over there for a moment?" Naruto asked softly as he stood up. Sakura, slightly confused, nevertheless did as Naruto asked, crossing her arms across her chest as she reached the spot he had indicated and turned around. Naruto took a deep breath and closed his eyes, concentrating on his face, trying to channel some chakra to his face. After a few moments the darkness of the inside of his eyelids was replaced by a brightening but fuzzy image of the world before him. He could see Sakura, visible as a collection of bright reds, yellows, and oranges, while most of the ground around them was a bluish color and the trees in the distance were a darker purple. Suddenly, a single spot of dull red in the middle of the gravel field caught his attention. "Sakura," he said, keeping his eyes closed and his attention focused on the glowing spot. "Check the ground 6 feet to your right. I think I've found the bell." Sakura blinked and walked to where Naruto had directed her and knelt. She stood back up a moment later, the third bell held securely in her hand. "Naruto," she said, turning to look at him in confusion. "How could you know it was there? You had your eyes closed the entire time." Naruto smirked and crossed his arms while he willed the new sensors on his face to disengage. Slowly the darkness returned, and once it was complete he opened his eyes again, blinking a few times at the sudden brightness. "I'll explain later, Sakura. Let's just say that another unexpected benefit of this damnable virus just showed itself," he said with a grin as he turned to head back towards their meeting spot. Meanwhile, Assuma had been trying to avoid the huge swarm of snakes that had been chasing it. He had slowly managed to whittle it down using some Kaiten jutsus, but there was still a fair number chasing him. Suddenly he felt 3 chakra signatures approaching from the rear. He spun around, to be greeted with the sight of his 3 students appearing out of the trees and stopping together as a group, standing confidently about 20 feet away from him. "Hello, sensei. Did you miss us?" Sakura asked with a smirk, holding up her hand, a bell dangling in it. "Or were you kept busy too by Lachesis' snake buncheons?" Naruto asked with laughter in his voice, holding up a second bell. As it appears you haven't realized that the three of us who surrounded you earlier were just some of Naruto's cage bunshin. Sasuke said with a smirk to rival Sakura's, his arms crossed, the third and final bell dangling from his right hand. Their cover blown, the three bunshins stood and two of them dropped their hinges, grinning for a few moments before dispelling themselves. Assuma looked between the three bunshins and his genin in confusion. "Wait, but how?" Assuma asked, his voice a simultaneous mixture of confusion and a tiny bit of pride that his students were able to work together so flawlessly. "If those were bunshins I should have been able to tell." "Not bunshins," Naruto said, shaking his head. "Cage bunshin." The remaining bunshin walked over to a boulder next to Assuma and punched it, shattering one side of it. Assuma's cigarette dropped from his mouth and to the ground as the other members of Team 7 all chuckled at the dumbstruck look on his face. "Damn it, father, you could have warned me that he's been allowed to study off that scroll," Assuma muttered in his own mind. "Na-sensei, you may be my teacher, but you certainly don't know about everything that I've been taught yet," Naruto said with a cheeky grin. "So, do we pass?" Assuma regained his posture and grinned at his resourceful students. "You all pass. But not because you got the bells." This time he was rewarded with looks of confusion on all three of their faces. "Okay, looks like Anko only warned him that there was a test, not the true purpose of it. I guess I have to thank her for that. The real purpose of this test was not to see whether you could get the bells or not. It was to see if you could work together as a functional team with a group that you had been tossed together with. You all pass with flying colors. I'm quite impressed," Assuma said as he lit up another cigarette and took a puff. It was a commonly known fact that all Sarutobi men develop tobacco addictions at some point in their lives. This exam has a roughly 60% fail rate because so many new teams fail to learn to work together. On the other hand, there are teams who never manage to get anywhere close to completing their challenge, but who passed because they showed clear teamwork. Assuma smiled at his students. "Congratulations. You are now officially genin of Konoha and members of Team 7. Now let's go get some barbecue to celebrate," Assuma said enthusiastically. His decree was met with cheers from his three students. As they exited the training ground he made sure to pick up his timer. He was surprised to see that it was barely 9:30. Team 7 had passed in record time. Team 7 was sitting at a table outside of a restaurant famous for their barbecue beef 3 hours later when the members of Team 11 trudged by, covered in dirt, some of their clothes torn up. They were followed by Kakashi, who had his nose stuck in an orange-covered book that Naruto instantly recognized. Most of the perverted shinobi of Konoha were guilty of reading said book after all. Naruto almost called out to Kid to ask her how they had did when Kitsumi started to turn their way. Realizing she would likely ruin his day by fangirling all over him, Naruto reacted without thinking. Whoosh. Where only moments before had been seated a blonde-haired shinobi with bright red sunglasses, a tan trench coat, and a decidedly bare chest, there was now a log, slowly settling into place after being transported to the chair. Sasuke, Sakura, and Assuma all blinked and stared in confusion at where Naruto had just disappeared from. Catching sight of Kitsumi, Sakura swore under her breath and performed a kawarimi as well, leaving a second log settling into a chair at Team 7's table. Sasuke's further confusion was fixed when moments later his cousin noticed him and came over all sweetness and honey. "Sasuke. It's so good to see you. Please, could you tell me where my beloved Naruto-kun is? I'll make it worth your while." Kitsumi practically purred as she leant in toward Sasuke. Behind her Sasuke could see Shino looking on with slight distaste evident on his face and Kid laughing her ass off as she realized why there were two logs sitting next to Sasuke. The better man would have found a diplomatic answer to Kitsumi's question. The braver man would have told Kitsumi to shut up and gone back to eating his meal. The smarter man would have lied and sent Kitsumi on a wild goose chase. Sasuke was none of these things. In a world where fear itself was a weapon, Kitsumi was the master. Even her own cousin was scared shitless by the manipulative preteen. So what did Sasuke do? Whoosh. Kitsumi spat out a leaf as a third log replaced Sasuke, rattling in the chair for a moment before falling. Slam. Ouch. Kitsumi cried out as she hopped on one foot, her other foot held in her hands and throbbing red. "Sasuke. I'm going to kill you when I get home." Shino merely observed with a distinct lack of emotion on his face, while Kid was rolling on the ground with her pup Ryoshimaru, laughing. Assuma sighed, shook his head, and stood, leaving a tip on the table beside their unfinished meals. After glancing at Kakashi, who was still engrossed in his book, he sighed and shunshined away to find his students. March 20th, 13 years after the day of the Kyuubi. The sun was already high in the sky as Sarutobi Assuma landed in a branch in the middle of a great forest near Konoha. He put a hand to the radio communicator attached to his ear and turned it on. "Smoking man to Lucky Sevens. What's the distance to the target?" he asked around the cigarette in his mouth. Snake eyes to Smoking man. 5 meters. we're ready anytime. Naruto's voice came back over the radio, a slight hiss in the background. Cherry Blossom to Smoking Man. I'm ready. Sakura's voice came over the radio as well. Arrogant bastard to Smoking Man. I'm in position. Sasuke muttered over the radio. Sasuke had been too busy training to take part in picking code names for their missions and had been forced to suffer through the indignity of being known as Arrogant Bastard for the past 8.5 months. Okay. Assuma said, dropping the cigarette onto the branch and putting it out with his foot. Go. Deeper in the forest 13-year-old genin flipped around the trees they had been hiding behind and leaped at a shadowed figure on the forest floor. The figure's ears instantly perked up at the sound and prepared to flee. Gotcha. Naruto cried out as he landed on the ground, the target grasped firmly in his arms. The tiger-ish looking cat struggled fiercely to break free from his grip. This human smelt like danger to him and he didn't want to be anywhere near him. Thus, when Naruto handed the cat off to Sakura, the cat clung to her and behaved like a good little kitty, for fear he would be taken by the scary man again. Ribbon on the left ear. Are you sure this is the target, Tora? Assuma asked over the radio link. He was currently strolling along the forest floor towards where the owling had come from. Yeah. Sasuke said over his radio, we're sure. Good. Assuma replied over the radio as he lit another cigarette. Lost Pet Tora search mission complete. Team 7 stood at attention in the mission office of the Hokage's tower as a corpulent, overly made-up woman hugged Tora tightly to her chest. Oh, my cute little Tora-chan. I was so worried. She exclaimed as she practically choked the life out of the cat. Never having seen the owner of the cat they had been required to catch on 23 separate occasions so far, Team 7's reactions were mixed. Naruto, who the cat had always seemed to dislike, muttered to take that cat under his breath. Sasuke, whose own mother Mikoto, despite being a jounin, could be just as smothering when her baby was gone for a few days on one of the stupid D-rank missions they were getting, merely blanched with a sweat drop on his forehead. Sakura merely cringed slightly, feeling very sympathetic for the cat that always responded nicely to her. No wonder it ran away. She thought. Now, Asuma's Team 7 Sarutobi Hiruzen said as he looked over a mission request form. Your next duty is him babysitting an elder's grandson, shopping in the neighboring village, and helping with potato digging. No thank you. Sasuke suddenly exclaimed, his eye twitching. Nearly 9 months of what were basically glorified errands had nearly cracked the young Uchiha's sanity. I want to do, a mission worthy of our skills. Find us a better one. I agree. Naruto thought silently. He had recognized the expression that had appeared on the Hokage's face, and Naruto didn't want to get drawn into whatever punishment he was contemplating for Sasuke. Geez, how annoying. Sakura thought, frowning at Sasuke. Sasuke was normally more reserved than her boyfriend Naruto, usually more together. I guess he just couldn't handle the monotony. Even Sakura was bored of stupid errands, but at least the training Assuma had been giving them had been helping. Sakura's taijutsu was improved, albeit nowhere near as strong as either of her teammates, and thanks to the exercises Assuma had given her, Sakura's chakra capacity had been slowly creeping up. I thought it was about time for this, Assuma thought to himself as he lit another cigarette and took a drag on it. Iruka looked like he was about to explode, though he also looked like he had expected Naruto to be the source of the outburst. However, the Hokage spoke up, saving the eardrums of everybody present in the room. Sasuke, I can understand how you must feel. But you must take this into consideration. Every day the village receives requests for missions, from babysitting to assassination. These missions are divided into categories by difficulty and are ranked A, B, C, or D. He said, speaking calmly. These missions are then assigned to teams or individual shinobi based on their level of skill. As you three have only become genin in the past year, D-rank missions are the only ones suitable for you at the moment. It is advisable that you have at least a year of training with a jounin instructor under your belt before you are given any mission C rank or higher. The Sandaime took another puff on his pipe and crossed his fingers. Surprisingly, it was Naruto who stepped forward this time. Whatever you may say, Aji-san, I'm not just the troublemaking brat anymore that I was when I was younger. Sakura's improvements under Asuma's leadership have been impressive and the team isn't half bad either. We are ready for this. Naruto said calmly. Iruka, who had been standing and ready to deliver a verbal barrage to the worst prankster the academy had had in over a decade stopped, slowly began to smile, and sat back down. Sasuke would have rounded on Naruto for calling him team in front of the Hokage, but a single word from the Sandaime stopped him in his tracks. Okay. Sasuke faced the Hokage again in confusion. If you want it that much, I'll give you a C-rank mission. The Sandaime said, his fingers interlaced in front of him as he smoked on his pipe. It's a protection mission of a certain individual. The twitching of Sasuke's eye ceased, and he smirked as he regained his usual confident arrogant composure. So who is it? he asked confidently, a tiny bit of excitement in his voice. A feudal lord. A princess. Sarutobi Hiruzen chuckled. Calm down. I'll introduce him. Hey, will you come in here? The door at the side of the room began to slide open as the members of Team 7 turned their heads to look. Azuna had not been having a good day. First, some pickpocket had tried to steal the money he had brought to purchase supplies and an escort. Thankfully, some kind citizen, fed up with one of her teammates over some inane thing, managed to connect with the thief's skull with one of her flailing arms, knocking the man into a wall in an alley and immediately into the realm of unconsciousness. Azuna, who had been drinking all day, as was his wont, had blinked, shrugged, and walked over to the man. After he had recovered his money, he relieved himself on the man's face before heading off to meet his contact to buy the supplies he needed. Then his contact, having heard of the financial difficulties of the wave, had attempted to strong-arm Tazuna by charging him ridiculous prices. As the goods Tazuna needed were extremely rare, he knew he wouldn't have been able to find them anywhere else. Sighing, he had given up and left the shop in disgust, several thousand ryo poor, but carrying a jug of a special compound he needed to help build his bridge. He couldn't have been out the door of the shop for more than 30 seconds before a team of Konoha's military police descended on the shop, arresting the man for passing intelligence to foreign nations. Then some stupid kids had collided with him, causing him to fall over and spill the jug of sake he had been drinking all over the ground. As he had been getting to his feet, not more than 20 feet ahead of where he had been heading, a rope snapped and a piano that some people had been hauling into the second story of a building crashed to the ground. And now, he had been kept waiting for over an hour in the interminable heat of the Hokage's tower while they waited for a team suitable for the mission he had requested could arrive. Hey, would you come in here? Tazuna heard the voice of the old man who ran things here say. Sighing, Tazuna stood up from the couch and pushed open the door into the bigger office. What's this? He asked as he took a swig from the bottle he was carrying. They're all a bunch of super brats. He leant against the doorframe and smirked. Especially the shortest one with the super stupid looking face. Are you really a ninja, hey? Standing before Tazuna were the members of Team 7. Sakura wore black shorts and a red battle dress. She had her hit-eye tied securely to her forehead, a red ribbon keeping her long pink hair back in an off-sides ponytail, and a pair of fingerless gloves with a metal plate on the back of the hands. Sasuke wore his pale pants and his dark, high-collared blue shirt with the Uchiha clan symbol on the back. His hair was spiked back and his hit-eye was securely tied on, shining on his forehead. And Naruto, whose shorter stature was always an uncomfortable topic for him, narrowed his eyes behind his sunglasses. Naruto was wearing pretty much the same clothes he had graduated the academy with. He wore his black pants with orange trim and his mesh shirt under his tan trench coat with the flames at the bottom. He had both forearms wrapped in bandages and wore a pair of fingerless black gloves similar to Sakura's. His headband had been replaced with his hit-eye in the duty of keeping his spiky blonde hair in check and he still wore his flame necklace and black sandals as well. But Tazuna certainly wasn't too far off on describing his face. Naruto still wore the over-the-top red sunglasses he had been using for the past 8.5 months. Both Sakura and Sasuke had complained that they made him look stupid, but Naruto felt that they caused opponents to underestimate him. They certainly worked in that respect when Inuzuka Kiba had decided to challenge him to a sparring match a few months back. Naruto's face was also mostly covered by a black cloth mask that rose over his nose and obscured the lower part of his face. He had gotten the idea from his brother Kakashi after the viral transformation had placed scales on his face and he felt it made him more intimidating as a ninja. Combined with his funky sunglasses though, it apparently just made him look stupid. Namikaze Naruto would deny it to his grave, but it was that precise moment when the drunk old bridge builder had insulted his look that made Naruto decide to change his method of obscuring his eyes. Naruto coldly reached up and removed his sunglasses, folding them up and slipping them into a case at his hip. When he looked back up at Tazuna, he intentionally ran chakra through the scales on his face, causing his eyes to turn a reddish-green color and turn slitted. Across the room, the slightly drunk bridge builder merely though he was imagining Naruto's eyes changing. I am the super expert bridge builder Tazuna. He said, not slurring a word despite having been drinking most of the day. I expect you to provide me super protection until I get back to my country and complete the bridge. Team 7 met the super bridge builder Tazuna 2 hours later, all geared up and ready to go. Sakura and Naruto were both geared up and calmly awaiting their sensei's arrival. Sakura had augmented her normal outfit with an extra brace of kunai and a storage scroll Anko had taught her how to use, thus freeing her from carrying a bulky equipment pack. Naruto had replaced his red sunglasses with a simple pair of thin black sunglasses and was wearing 2 collapsible Fuma shurikens strapped to his back, a storage scroll on his lower back carrying most of his gear, and 2 brace of kunai dangling on chains across his chest under his trench coat. Sasuke, having been too arrogant to ask for help from his teammates, was forced to wear a backpack. He looked grumpy when he saw his two teammates were all using storage scrolls. Naruto and Sakura shared a knowing look and a slight chuckle. Over the past several months, finding ways to prank or otherwise annoy their teammate had become their favorite pastime. Their periodically moody Uchiha teammate had long since learned to check his shoes for and clothes for snakes before putting them on. "Alright, Team 7. We're ready to go. Diamond Formation Alpha." Assuma Sarutobi said, appearing in a puff of smoke. The Jounin was fully geared and ready to go, his equipment stored in a large pack on his back. "Diamond Formation Alpha. We'll maintain this arrangement until we reach our target for today and make camp. Move out." The three genin instantly fanned out into a diamond formation, with Tazuna in the center and Assuma bringing up the rear. Sakura and Naruto took the flanks as Sasuke took point. As the members of Team 7 began the long walk towards the wave country, Naruto's sensitive ears caught Tazuna muttering under his breath. "I asked to hire ninja, and they give me teenage brats. What's the world coming to? They won't be any use when his underlings come for me." Naruto chose not to draw attention to the man's comments, instead alerting Lachesis to be on guard with a quick hiss. He also covertly slipped a pair of kunai into his sleeves, ready to attack or defend at a moment's notice. 6 hours later. Team 7 and their charge had been walking for 6 hours straight and had spent most of that time in silence, each contemplating a different thing. Tazuna had been worried about what sort of men Gato would send after him. Likely it would be real ninjas, and these teenage brats he had hired would meet unfortunate ends. Sasuke had been excited about finally being on a real mission and was fighting to keep his excitement under control and keep focused on the road. Sakura had been splitting her time between private thoughts about her boyfriend, thoughts of things she wouldn't be able to do with him for several years yet, not that that ever stopped her from thinking them, and performing a chakra control exercise Anko had taught her. The exercise would help with the chakra control of someone like Naruto, who had relatively poor control even after 6 years of training, but for Sakura, it had a different purpose. It was slow going, but after several months of using the exercise, her chakra reserves had increased by nearly 20%, a very important fact given she had pretty low reserves to begin with. Assuma had been keeping his eyes open for any sign of threat, particularly having heard Tazuna's mutterings and become suspicious himself. He had also noticeably refrained from smoking, causing his students to wonder what he was worried about. And Naruto had been extremely busy within his own mind. While Lachesis and two snake buncheons he had summoned peeked their heads out of his trench coat, covertly tasting the air for danger scents and using their heat-sensitive pits to scan for human heat sources in the woods around them, Naruto's body was on autopilot. The barest part of his consciousness tied to instinct guiding him as they walked. The rest of Naruto's consciousness was elsewhere, sitting on top of a large boulder in the middle of a clearing in a forested jungle that existed in perpetual night. He sat staring into the red eyes of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, who stood nearby. Neither party had spoken a word in nearly an hour, but had anyone spoken, they would have interrupted a conversation of extreme depth. The Kyuubi no Kitsune, greatest of the 9 Bijuu, was a creature of raw elemental power. With a swish of its many tails, it had once been able to cause earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes. It had been able to wipe the land flat before it or leave mountains in its wake. And now, trapped unwillingly within a human, doomed to perish should its host ever perish, the Kyuubi was taking steps to ensure its continued existence. It was teaching the brat. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the Kyuubi blinked. And blinked again. Kyuubi turned his gaze away from Naruto, who had also blinked and was now taking several deep breaths. Finally, Naruto's voice broke the silence. "I think I understand now what you mean by the voice of nature. This is still a head trip though." Naruto shook his head as if clearing it out. The Kyuubi's response was barking laughter, something to which Naruto had become fast accustomed over the past several months. I sincerely doubt you truly grasp what I mean. But you may finally have an inkling of an iota of a bit of understanding." Kyuubi turned back to face Naruto as he stood and stretched on top of the rock. Kyuubi chuckled again. "But that is neither here nor there. You have made far more progress in understanding these concepts of which I have deigned to teach you than any mortal has a right to. There are very few in your world who would understand even as much as you have begun to understand." Kyuubi grinned darkly at his pupil. "I must grudgingly admit to being impressed, brat." Kyuubi's voice still carried hints of scorn and dark humor in it, but Naruto had long since grown accustomed to that as well. He had figured out early on that treating the Kyuubi, who was trapped within Naruto with no chance of escape, with a modicum of respect earned surprising dividends. Kyuubi was a great demon lord, and being trapped within a human, a damn mortal monkey, with no control over his life or death, was far more terrifying a prospect than he would ever admit. So it had been a pleasant surprise when his host, his jailer, had faced him without fear and with respect upon their first meeting. Iwubi had come away from the discussion extremely surprised, as not only had the boy listened to him attentively and shown him the respect due a demon lord, even one who has lost power over himself, but it also promised he would return to his mindscape on a regular basis so that they might converse. Since that day, nearly 9 months prior, Naruto had spoken with the Kyuubi at least once a day. The two had formed a rapport, albeit a tentative one, and the Kyuubi, for all his haughtiness and power, had begun to mildly respect the Gaki for what little respect he could have for a monkey spawn. Some days, the Kyuubi attempted to teach Naruto to commune with nature in the manner that Biju had learned long ago. His motives were not altogether altruistic. A stronger Naruto meant his own chances of survival would be increased. A Naruto who could master the communion with nature would eventually be able to provide an avenue for the Kyuubi to experience the real world once again, if not escape. He had gotten quite bored of the kid's jungle mindscape over the past 12 years and longed to feel real wind in his fur once again. This part of his plans he had not shared with the kid. As he watched Naruto get down off of his rock, Kyuubi appraised the way the brat moved. Where the brat had once moved in sharp hard motions, he now seemed to flow as he moved, almost like a snake. This was a result of both his training in his mother's Hibi-style taijutsu, but also as a result of his pairing with his partner Lachesis. If the Kyuubi had to put a name to the sort of bond Naruto and Lachesis shared, he had to say that it was much like the animal familiars of a people long since gone from his world. The Kyuubi remembered them both with fondness and regret. Regret, because the acolytes of him and his fellow Biju at the time had been adept at knowing just where to scratch to soothe an unreachable itch. Fondness, because he had thoroughly enjoyed wiping them from the face of the earth when they had attempted to turn him and his fellow Biju into mere weapons. Thus was also why the Kyuubi had come to Konoha 13 years ago. He had learned of someone attempting to recreate the powers of the showdown, to recreate his ability to control the Biju. The Kyuubi had had enough of being a human's lapdog to last him till the end of eternity. I should probably be getting back to the real world. Lachesis is reporting some odd sense, and I'd rather be at full capacity if anything happens. Kyuubi was broken free from his reverie by the sound Naruto's voice. Then go kid. Do not waste any more of my time. Kyuubi replied brusquely, turning away in dismissal. Out of the corner of his eye, the Kyuubi saw Naruto smirk and then bow. The smirk he could forgive because it was just Naruto's way of telling Kyuubi that he could see through his haughtiness. Naruto faded away suddenly, his form vanishing in a matter of seconds as he returned his consciousness to the real world. Sighing, the Kyuubi exited the clearing, weaving between trees until he reached his destination. The second clearing, much smaller than the one he and Naruto met in, came into view. It had clearly been burned, the ground being covered in a fine layer of soft ash, and the sides of the trees facing the clearing were charred black. In the center of the clearing lay a small bed of leaves and vines, resting on top of a mattress of ash. Silently, the Kyuubi walked over and curled up on top of the bed of vegetation. Hurry back kid. It gets boring in here. Within moments, the only sounds to be heard were the sounds of the forest creatures, of the wind blowing through the canopy of the jungle, and the very loud snores of one very asleep lord of foxes. Tazuna-san. Naruto heard Sakura ask as he became fully aware of the real world again. What? The old drunk asked, turning his head to look at the pink-haired Kunoichi. You're from the wave country, right? Sakura continued with a thoughtful look on her face. What about it? Tazuna replied grumpily. On his other side Naruto smirked, utilizing the distraction to taste the air quickly, his tongue momentarily elongating and forking. It wouldn't do to disturb the client after all. Assuma-sensei. Do they have ninjas in that country too? Sakura asked as she looked back over her shoulder towards their sensei. Assuma smiled faintly as he replied, loud enough for all three of his students to hear. No, not in the wave country. They are small enough and removed enough that they do not receive much interference from the larger nations, thus they don't have a pressing need for a shinobi village. Assuma said. But, in most other countries, while the culture and customs may be different, hidden villages do exist, and so do ninjas. In many countries on the continent, the existence of a shinobi village means military power. Sakura turned back to face forward, deep in thought. Thanks Assuma-sensei. She tossed back as an afterthought as she absent-mindedly reached up and fixed her hair as she walked. But don't worry. There won't be any ninja combat on this mission. It's just a C rank after all. Assuma said with a grin. Only Naruto noticed the way this statement left Azuna subdued, looking down at the ground. Naruto spoke quietly, drawing the attention of the three snakes currently wrapped around his body under his trench coat. If anyone had been able to hear him, they would have heard a strange hissing sound, much like a snake. Had they been born with or gained the capacity to understand this strange tongue, this is what they would have heard. Azuna knows something he isn't telling us. When Assuma mentioned that we won't be encountering any foreign ninja, his scent changed and he tensed up. Now, what are these strange scents you mentioned? They might be important. We smell waters. Pudless. But there has been no rain for weeks. And we smell something's metals. Naruto frowned as a large puddle in the middle of the road came into view. Adjusting the kunai in his sleeves, Naruto silently motioned for two of the snakes to slide down around his arms. Lachesis herself remained coiled around Naruto's chest, her head resting on his neck and ready to strike. As they walked past the puddle, neither Sasuke nor Sakura appeared to notice anything. Naruto carefully made sure not to take notice of it, as he did not want to alert whoever was waiting to ambush them that he was prepared. Assuma likewise gave it only a tiny thoughtful look before walking past. After they had passed the puddle, the water suddenly spiraled upwards, revealing two black cloaked figures, both male, wearing breathing masks, wearing hit-8 with 4 diagonal lines on them, and metal horns attached to the sides, and with a large clawed metal gauntlet on their right arms. Fast as lightning, one of the figures leapt into the air, a large chain running between his gauntlet and his partner's gauntlet. He flipped over Assuma and before anyone could react had wrapped Assuma in the chain. "What?" Assuma cried out. "One down." One of the men said, both figures pulling their arms away from Assuma faster than the members of Team 7 could follow. Naruto saw Asuma's eyes widen in surprise. As Tazuna and the members of Team 7 watched on, the razor-sharp chain tightened and Assuma was torn to pieces, blood flying everywhere. Sasuke and Sakura cried out in surprise and terror, while Naruto started to crouch. "Do down." A voice said very close to his ear as the two enemy shinobi appeared behind Naruto. Naruto's face held a look of fear for a single brief moment before turning into a grin as he began to laugh sadistically. Almost faster than the two shinobi could react, two long black snakes struck out from Naruto's sleeves. The two shinobi barely managed to dodge the 2-inch-long fangs of the snakes as they both leapt away, clearly surprised by such a sudden attack from a mere genin. This gave Sasuke the chance he needed. As the two enemy shinobi prepared to attack Naruto with a different tactic, Sasuke leapt into the air and tossed a kunai, catching a link in the razor-edge chain and pinning it to a tree on the side of the path. Both figures tugged on their ends of the chains. "I'm stuck." One of the shinobi cried out as he was unable to withdraw the chain from where it was embedded in the tree. Naruto smirked as he and Sasuke flanked the two shinobi. "HMPPH. You underestimated us." Sasuke began, smirking as he unfolded a Fuma shuriken, spinning it with one hand. "And for that you will pay." Naruto finished with a dark grin on his face, 3 hissing snakes poking out of his trench coat. "Now you'll see why they call us the dynamic duo." The two boys cried as they rushed forward, both preparing to strike death blows to the two shinobi. The eyes of both enemy shinobi widened for a moment before suddenly the connection between the chain and their gauntlets broke. Thinking fast, the two dodged around the attacking genin faster than they could follow, making a mad dash towards where Sakura stood with a pair of kunai in her hands, prepared to defend Tazuna. Both shinobi grinned behind their masks as they struck forward with their clawed arms. Their grins were instantly wiped from their faces as their momentum carried them into a clothesline blow from Assuma, knocking both shinobi out ice cold. All 3 members of Team 7, and Tazuna as well, stared in pleasant surprise as their sensei, who just moments before they had thought dismembered, dropped the unconscious bodies of the enemy to the ground. "Well," Assuma said, lighting up a cigarette for the first time in 6 hours. "That's that. Nice job, Sasuke, Naruto. You did good." Assuma took a drag on his cigarette as Sasuke smirked that little smirk of his, and Naruto grinned. Naruto's grin turned to a full-on smile as he suddenly found himself embraced in a massive hug from his girlfriend, who was beaming that their sensei had praised her boyfriend. Naruto's 2 snake buncheons immediately vanished in puffs of smoke as Sakura's uber-strength hug squished them out of existence. "Tazuna-san." Assuma said coldly as he lifted the 2 fallen shinobi. "What is it?" Tazuna exclaimed, sweating bullets. "We need to talk." Assuma continued, his voice still cold as ice. Several minutes later saw the members of Team 7 in a semicircle around a tree. Assuma had tied the unconscious shinobi to the tree after stripping them of all weapons. "These look Chunin from Kurigakure. These shinobi are known to keep fighting no matter what," Assuma said, dropping his spent cigarette to the ground and crushing it with his foot. "How did you read our movements?" one of the Chunin asked, his head lowered in resignation. "On a sunny day like this when it hasn't rained in days, well, there just isn't going to be a puddle in the middle of an uncovered road," Assuma replied with a chuckle. "If you knew that, why did you let the brats fight?" Tazuna asked as he stared at the 2-pound Chunin. Assuma chuckled again. "I could have killed these 2 instantly if I had wanted, true. But there was something I needed to find out. Namely, who were these 2 after, you or us?" Tazuna paled noticeably as Assuma turned to face him. "We hadn't heard that there were shinobi after you. Our mission was simply to protect you from thieves or gangs. Now this is at least a B-rank mission. Given that you have lied to us, we are fully within our rights to turn around and take you back to Konoha." Azuna's shoulders slumped. "Assuma, I need to talk to you," he said dejectedly. Assuma nodded after a moment, all ears. Somewhere in the Wave Country, in a massive mansion, the commander of the two Chunin who had come after Team 7 had the dubious privilege of being harangued by the very man who had hired them. "You failed. I paid you guys a lot of money because I heard you were a very strong former ninja." The short man yelled at the tall shinobi reclining on a couch in the center of the room. Said shinobi wore camouflage leg and arm warmers, vertically striped pants, his hit eye slantwise on his head, and bandages around his face. He neglected to wear a shirt, instead having a black strap that ran from his pants and circled his neck. "Stop your bitching. This time I'll go personally, with this head-slicing cleaver," the shinobi said, swinging the overly large sword that had been slung over his shoulder forward until the blade was a mere foot from Gatu's face. "And kill them." March 22, 13 years after the day of the Kyuubi. After 2 more days of travel, Team 7 had finally reached the coast and the border with the Wave Country. They were currently sitting quietly on a small boat as the boat's owner paddled, carrying them through the deep mists that were currently floating over the water. "Whoa," Naruto said as the end of a massive, unfinished stone bridge came into view. He currently had his sunglasses off and tucked into his pocket, and if someone had looked closely they would have seen that his eyes had turned slitted and had a reddish-green tinge to them. Given the environment they were in, Naruto had felt it was prudent to scan for heat sources, just in case. According to Asuma-sensei, Suiton masters were common in Kurigakure, which meant that while crossing the water, Team 7 and their charge were at their most vulnerable. As he looked around the boat, Naruto saw Sasuke sitting at the front of the boat, his face in a frown. "I bet Uchiha is brooding over his brother. Again." He saw Tazuna sitting in the middle, his eyes downcast. Naruto briefly remembered Tazuna revealing the truth behind why he had hired them, that a ruthless businessman named Gatu wanted him dead, so he couldn't complete his bridge and break Gatu's stranglehold over the Wave Country. He remembered how after considering for a while, Assuma had sent a messenger bird back to Konoha, requesting that someone come and collect the 2 Kurigakure Chunin, who Assuma left unconscious with a series of pressure points, and that reinforcements be sent along. They had not had time to wait though, as to do so would have made them sitting ducks if there were any more shinobi involved. Thus they had progressed towards the wave, anticipating that their backup would catch up with them within a day of arriving in the wave. He saw Sakura staring idly out at the water as the boat slid silently through the mists. Naruto resisted the urge to chuckle when he caught the faint smile and blush on his girlfriend's face. She had gotten that look quite often in the past year, and Naruto had quickly developed a suspicion as to what she was thinking when she got that look. I wonder what act she is imagining this time. Ever since she borrowed one of Kakashi's Uchiha books, she's gotten the look far more regularly. Not that Naruto minded the fact that she was having those thoughts. Just that at times Sakura could be, well, quite pushy, if you catch my drift. And finally he saw Assuma, who had his eye closed and seemed as if he was asleep. Naruto had learned from experience however that the Jounin was likely meditating in order to increase his ability to sense chakra, to possibly increase their chances of detecting and countering an attack on the boat. When they finally reached the other side of the water and disembarked from the boat, the owner of the boat wished them luck and left the dock to move his boat to another location. If Tazuna's bridge construction failed, the man clearly did not want to be associated with them. Team 7, again in formation around the old drunk Tazuna, swiftly exited the city along a path through the trees, leading towards where Tazuna said his house lay. Naruto's eyes were still a red-green as he overlaid his heat vision over his normal vision. Over the months he had learned to more effectively combine his 2 forms of vision, as well as use them both simultaneously, but still separate from one another. He also had a pair of kunai up his sleeves, ever ready like his mother had taught him, as well as lachesis and 6 snake buncheons he had concealed carefully within his clothes. If they were attacked by enemy shinobi again he wanted to be fully prepared, capable of striking with the deadly snakes from any direction. Sakura, who kept closer to Tazuna as a rear guard as she was self-admittedly the weak point in the team when it came to actual combat skills, had palmed a pair of shuriken as soon as they had exited the boat, ready to throw at a moment's notice. Sasuke, who had dropped into his cold holier-than-thou behavior, kept his hands on his pockets, where he had kunai discreetly hidden and ready for him to draw at a moment's notice. After about 20 minutes of walking, Naruto's heat vision paid off. To their right, concealed within a bunch of bushes along the edge of the trail, he clearly saw a crouched figure of a man with a telltale cold spot, indicating a metal weapon. Naruto had to force himself not to widen his eyes in surprise at the size of the weapon. In the bushes the figure was grasping his sword and preparing to strike. I see no wonder the demon brothers didn't stand a chance. The man thought as he lined up a strike that would surely decapitate the Konoha shinobi and more importantly his target Tazuna. Konohagakure's Assuma of the Flaming Winds. This could be interesting. The figure drew his sword and with one massive throw of his arm, flung the blade spinning across the path towards the five soon-to-be-dead figures. "Everyone get down." Naruto and Assuma cried out simultaneously. Sakura and Sasuke both dropped to the ground, Sakura dragging Tazuna down with her, while Naruto and Assuma both dodged to the side, avoiding the incoming blade completely. The giant blade embedded itself in a tree on the opposite side of the road, stuck halfway into the trunk. Sasuke and Sakura both gasped as they looked up and saw the tall, intimidating figure standing on top of the handle of. Naruto merely narrowed his eyes, readying his snakes to strike at a moment's notice. Wrapped around his torso, her head nestled against his neck, Lachesis practically hummed with excitement and energy. Not for the first time since he had encountered and become bound to the mysterious snake, the summoning tattoo on Naruto's right forearm began to glow a faint green as chakra was channeled from his near-unlimited stores, flowing into Lachesis through the link between them. Assuma had instantly drawn his trench knives, chakra channeled into his hands, ready to release into the knives in an instant. "Momochi Zabuza, Nukenin of Kurigakure. This is a surprise," Assuma said coldly, letting his cigarette fall from his mouth to the ground where he ground it into dust. Assuma caught Sasuke tensing up. "Stay put, Sasuke. This one is on a whole nother level than the ones we fought before. I want you, Sakura and Naruto to guard Tazuna. I'll deal with Zabuza." Zabuza chuckled. "I'm sorry, Assuma of the Flaming Winds, but I'm here for the old man. He must die. But it appears that I must defeat you first." Suddenly Zabuza vanished, moving faster than the three genin could follow. He reappeared about 40 feet away, standing on the surface of a small lake, the water rippling outward as wave after wave of chakra rolled off of him. "Everyone, be on guard. I'm sensing a buildup of chakra." Assuma cried out as he dropped into a defensive stance, trench knives at the ready. Zabuza finished his hand seals and opened his eyes. "Suiton. Kurigakure no Jutsu." Immediately the Nukenin was obscured as a massive cloud of mist expanded outward from around him, covering the entire area in a thick mist. Sasuke tightened his fist around the kunai in his hands. "He's gone." Sakura cried out, beginning to get afraid. Naruto snorted and stepped forward away from Tazuna. "I can handle this one, sensei. Why don't you hang back and make sure these three don't get hurt?" Naruto said with a tiny bit of calculated arrogance. Through the mist, he watched as Zabuza and three Zabuza-sized shadows of cold, nearly the same temperature of the mist around him and only visible because of their density and the slight difference in temperature between the water and air, moved silently through the mist to surround them. He saw the real Zabuza change direction towards him at this announcement. Naruto smirked. "Finally, an opponent I can test this maneuver on. And he suspects nothing. The fool is probably underestimating us. We'll show him why you never underestimate a snake," he thought, his vision momentarily revealing a small clearing containing the Kyuubi and a massive version of Lachesis. "Yes. Battle it is." Lachesis hissed. "Be careful, brat. This is no simple chunin and I don't want to die." Kyuubi replied grumpily. Within his mindscape Naruto grinned. "You just be ready if I need your help, Kyuubi." That was all Naruto replied as the vision faded and the world returned, viewed through heat and eyes simultaneously. Silently, Naruto performed a brief series of hand signs as Zabuza approached through the mist, ending on a distinguishing crossmark seal. Swish. As he formed three clones around him, Zabuza smirked behind his mask. Assuma of the Flaming Winds would certainly provide a challenge. "I can handle this one, sensei. Why don't you hang back and make sure these three don't get hurt?" Zabuza heard Naruto say. "But first I'll separate this brat's mouth from his head." Zabuza approached silently through the mist as his three clones spread out, drawing his sword and holding it out to his side. He paused momentarily, not more than 5 feet in front of the genin, who clearly couldn't see him through the impenetrable mists. Zabuza smirked and then swung his sword through the air at head level for the foolish blonde teenager. Swish. Zabuza's blade slid through the space that mere milliseconds before had been occupied by Naruto's neck. Reacting faster than Zabuza could have predicted, Naruto had fallen backwards, his legs kicking out from under him as he fell. He felt Zabuza's blade pass a bare inch over his nose as he fell, and as he kicked out his legs the first pair of snake bunchen launched out, wrapping around Zabuza's legs and sinking their fangs in. Zabuza and his sword instantly collapsed in a puddle of water as, true to his rank as a jounin, Zabuza used a Kawarimi to replace himself with one of his 4 clones. From out of the mist Assuma heard the swish and the splash of water and then heard nearly Naruto's voice echo from seemingly everywhere out of the mist. "Gyuuten. Chirasu." There was a sudden rush of wind and all of Zabuza's chakra summoned mist was blown away, revealing nearly 40 Narutos scattered around the clearing, the 2 remaining clones advancing on Tazuna and the other 2 members of Team 7, and Zabuza standing once again on the water of the lake. Assuma immediately spun and leapt at the nearest clone, lashing out with his trench knives before going into a roll, as about a third of Naruto's clones boxed it in, but not before the Mizubunshin sword dissipated the clones. Hishutsubum. Assuma extended his trench knives with blades of wind as he struck out, dissipating the surprised clone immediately. Sasuke and Sakura finally got over their surprise as the final clone began to swing the massive sword at them. The sword was stopped by most of Naruto's remaining clones, who sued their bodies to slow it long enough for Sakura and Sasuke to counterattack. It too dissipated suddenly as it was dissolved by a pair of kunai and a pair of shuriken that impacted with its chest. Back on the water, the real Zabuza frowned before spinning in place with his sword drawn, dissipating the remaining cage bunshin, who made a seemingly foolish suicide rush at him. No way those three are genin if they reacted that quickly. What the hell is going on here? Naruto pushed off the ground into a handstand, smirking at Zabuza. You want to go another round? Or are you gonna give up quietly? He said with a smirk as Lachesis slithered onto the ground from his right sleeve. The black and gold snake grew as she went until she was nearly 18 feet in length, slithering towards the water. Lachesis, use it now. Naruto yelled out as he pressed off the ground again with his hands, flipping and spinning in the air so that he landed on his feet facing Zabuza. Page Bunsen no Jutsu. Lachesis hissed as she suddenly glowed blue. With a massive puff of smoke and a massive splashes, the water around Zabuza was suddenly filled by over 1,000 black and gold writhing forms. Back on shore, Tazuna stared in shock and a little fear as the massive writhing snakes converged on Zabuza, who suddenly found that no matter how many of the creatures he dispelled with slices of his sword, 3 times as many moved forward to fill their place. Naruto stood on the edge of the water laughing at Zabuza's predicament when something in a tree on the far side of the lake caught his attention. With a few quick hand signals he had Assuma by his side, his trench knives still glowing. Assuma-sensei, there is a figure in the tree on the other side of the lake, the tall one with red flowers. I'm not sure how long they have been there, but I suspect they are involved with Zabuza. Naruto said quietly as he kept his eyes glued on the hidden figure. Assuma nodded in understanding before running out onto the water heading towards Zabuza. However, before he could reach the figure of Zabuza, who had become entangled as nearly 24 of the Lachesis clones had latched onto his limbs and dragged him down onto the shore as he attempted to escape, 4 senbon needles came flying out of a tree on the opposite bank of the lake and slammed into his neck. Zabuza's eyes rolled back into his head and he collapsed on the edge of the bank, half in and half out of the water. The figure with black hair and wearing a Kurigakure hunter nin mask dropped out of the tree Naruto had pointed out to Assuma just moments before next to the body. I thank you for providing the distraction needed so that I could take Mamachi Zabuza down. He is wanted for crimes against Kurigakure and he managed to wipe out my entire squad 2 weeks ago. Even with 2 weeks recovery, I did not stand a chance at taking him until you 5 showed up and took him down for me. You have Kurigakure and my thanks. The figure said in a voice that could have been male or female, none of the members of Team 7 could tell for sure. With their point made, the Kurigakure hunter nin lifted the deceased corpse of Zabuza and disappeared in a water shunshin before anyone could react. Naruto's eyes narrowed, something his mother had once taught him about hunter nin protocols, trying to force its way out of his memory and into the forefront of his mind. Naruto. You were amazing. Sakura's energetic cries as the pink-haired Kunoichi wrapped her arms around Naruto from behind knocked him out of his musing, the minutiae of esoteric assassin knowledge he had been trying to remember momentarily forgotten. I just kept that bastard distracted, sweetie. Lachesis did all the hard work. Naruto replied with a grin, reaching one hand up to stroke his girlfriend's cheek as she snuggled the other against him. Will you two cut out the mushy stuff? Sasuke's voice came from behind them, grumpy till the end. It's bad enough I have to deal Kitsumi going on and on about how awesome you are while we're home, without having to deal with you two going all mushy on missions. Naruto just blinked at his teammate momentarily. Sakura on the other hand smirked and turned Naruto's head to face her with her hands, kissing him deeply. Both genin knew that Sasuke was still attracted to Sakura, but the Uchiha at least had the smarts to recognize that she was well and good off the market. His cousin on the other hand still hadn't gotten that message about Naruto. Is everyone alright? Assuma asked as he finished putting his trench knives away and lit up a cigarette. Azuna, who had landed on the ground in a heap with his pack when the fighting began, merely grunted in reply before uncorking a bottle of sake and taking a swig. Sasuke smirked and reported no injuries, Sakura following suit when she broke her kiss with her boyfriend a moment later. Assuma heard no reply from Naruto, but chuckled when he glanced towards his blonde protege and saw what was keeping his mouth occupied. Sakura had reinitiated the kiss as soon as she had reported her status, and Naruto was currently caught up in his girlfriend's passion. Sasuke continued to look moody as Assuma gathered them up to continue on to the relative safety of Tazuna's house, which at least could be fortified against any follow-up attacks by Gatu's men. 10 minutes later Team 7 and the old bridge builder Tazuna finally reached his house. It was alone in a clearing about half an hour's walk from the village and was flanked by forests on 2 sides, a massive grass clearing on the third, and a small lake that ran alongside that. When Tazuna knocked on the door there was a long tense silence before a young brunette woman opened the door apprehensively, her eyes lighting up in happiness when she saw who it was. "Dad." The woman cried out as she pulled Tazuna into a hug. "Inari and I were afraid you weren't going to make it." Tazuna chuckled. "With these 4 protecting me there was no way I couldn't have made it back." Tsunami smiled and released her father, motioning for the exhausted members of Team 7 to enter her domicile and take a load off. 4 hours later. The members of Team 7 and the Tazuna household were sitting around the dinner table shortly after night had fallen. Tsunami, with Sakura's help, was busy putting the finishing touches on a large dinner to thank Team 7 for bringing her father home safely. "So, Sakura isn't it? I couldn't help but notice you seem to be really close with that blonde boy, Naruto. If you don't mind my asking, but what's with those odd markings on his face?" Tsunami asked the younger pink-haired girl quietly. Sakura tensed up momentarily before replying, hoping Tsunami hadn't caught her momentary lapse in composure. "Naruto has what we call a Kekkei Genkai. It's a power he inherited from his parents, and unfortunately it gave him some unique facial markings." Sakura began, telling a little white lie to protect her boyfriend. She knew that he was still very sensitive about both being a Jinchuriki and about the snake stuff. Along with ungodly amounts of chakra, stamina, and a demon lord in his belly. And that's before taking that snake stuff into account. "Besides, I find the markings attractive. They give him an exotic look." Sakura smiled slightly to herself, a slight blush rising on her cheeks as her mind momentarily distracted itself with thoughts of how her exotic boy toy could put that stamina to good use if she could just get him into bed. Any further questions from Tsunami unfortunately died a boarding as there was a sharp knock at the door. Everyone in the kitchen tensed up immediately. Naruto and Sasuke were the first to move, Sasuke drawing a pair of kunai and backing up against the wall in the kitchen, while Naruto slipped silently into the living room and channeled chakra into the heat-sensitive organs in his face. Assuma moved before either genin could act further, opening the door with his trench knives drawn, ready to go. Standing beyond the door were 3 Konoha genin and their Konoha Jounin instructor. Inside Tazuna's house, all 3 genin members of Team 7 groaned. "Naruto-kun." Kitsumi's falsely sweet voice rang out, the dark-haired girl rushing through the door past Assuma in an attempt to get to the object of her desire. Naruto however was thankfully not one to suffer deer in headlight syndrome and performed a quick set of hand signs. As Kitsumi's arms closed around his body Naruto's kawarimi completed, replacing the blonde-haired boy with a trash can from the kitchen. It took Kitsumi a moment to notice her mistake, plenty of time for Naruto to share a look with Assuma from the kitchen, grab Sasuke and Sakura, and vamoose. The blonde genin reappeared on the roof, both of his teammates letting out sighs of relief at the momentary reprieve. "Damn it. Of all the teams Oji-san could have sent, he sent them," Naruto exclaimed exasperatedly as he sat down. Sakura dropped to the roof next to him and wrapped her arms tightly around him, snuggling close to her boyfriend, whispering comfort in his ear. "And Hirai was looking forward to the excitement of this mission, and that bitch has to show up and ruin it. Why couldn't she have done us the favor of falling off a roof and breaking her legs? Too bad for the meaty-nins to fix. Why, I ask you, why?" Sasuke ranted as he took a seat looking the opposite direction. "While they were up here they might as well work as lookouts as well." Back inside Tazuna's house Kitsumi's 2 teammates were making their entrance much more sedately. Inuzuka Kid entered with a large white puppy with blue markings on her heels. She had an air of exhausted excitement about her, like a dog that has just exhausted itself playing. She was followed by Aburame Shino, who remained mysterious behind his dark sunglasses and high-collared jacket and who spoke not a word. Their silver-haired Jounin instructor Hada Kakashi followed his students inside. "We are your backup, Assuma," Kakashi said matter-of-factly as Assuma closed the door behind him. "Report on the situation." Assuma bristled as Kakashi attempted to take control of the situation. "Yes, you are my backup, Kakashi. That means that I am still in command of this mission." Assuma led Kakashi off into another room so that the two could begin planning what to do for defenses and how to prepare for Zabuza's eventual return. Kitsumi on the other hand was still screaming bloody murder about getting trash all over her cute new ninja outfit and how it must have been that blasted cousin of hers who did it. He chuckled lightly and Shino merely shook his head. Kitsumi, who would have everyone believe that she was the leader of the team, had been a major disappointment for the bug user as a partner. He would have much rather have been teamed with Naruto, even if his bugs did shy away from the blonde enigma lately. Ever since he began to wear that strange face mask, so similar to the ones Kakashi wore. Shino made a mental note to keep a closer eye on the blonde. Perhaps he could determine just why his bugs were skittish around him lately. Back on the roof, the members of Team 7 all chuckled as they heard Kitsumi railing downstairs. Naruto quickly summoned a brace of cage bunshin and dispatched them into a random search pattern around the house. Better safe than sorry after all. Rather than risk dealing with Kitsumi again that night, Team 7 had set up a pair of tents just inside the edge of the forest, out of sight the house. Naruto had used a pair of shadow clones to get some food from inside, which Tsunami was more than happy to provide, before disappearing back to the woods to spend the evening snuggled up with his girlfriend. When they returned the next morning, Assuma sent them a silent nod in understanding of their actions. "Naruto-kun. There you are. Finally." Natsumi's high-pitched voice threatened to shatter Naruto's eardrums as the dark-haired girl leapt forward and wrapped her arms around him. Naruto went stock still well behind him. Sakura clenched her fists and started to growl. 3, 2, 1, Naruto thought, taking a deep breath. Eek. What's that snake doing here? I thought I told you never to bring that creepy thing near me, Kitsumi cried out in fear as she fell away from Naruto, Lachesis' head poking its way out of Naruto's jacket. Stupid humans, girls. Master is Sakuras. Lachesis hissed, her tongue flicking out constantly. Behind Naruto, Sakura giggled for a moment before stepping forward and draping her arm suggestively around Naruto, leading her head over his shoulder. You know, Kitsumi, you've really got to stop this. Naruto is mine and I am his, and no amount of fangirling is going to get you his affection. You'd have better luck going after your cousin, though I'm fairly certain he'd disappear just as quickly, Sakura said with a smirk. She slid around to Naruto's front until he caught her in his arms, holding her close. The two genin began to kiss gently, giggling and reveling in the looks flashing across Kitsumi's face. Serves you right. Kid said as she stepped forward and gave Kitsumi a hand up. But Kitsumi stuttered. I'm the daughter of an important clan. He should be courting me, not that harlot. Her clan is almost all civilians. It's not fair. Kakashi shook his head. Kitsumi was perhaps the strongest member of his team, even without having awoken her Sharingan yet when they were near Naruto, she turned into the worst fangirl in existence. Whatever, Uchiha. Just get your butt off the floor so Sensei can give us our assignments for today. Kid said, pulling Kitsumi all the way to her feet, turning to face Kakashi and Assuma. Kakashi looked like he was about to speak when Assuma cleared his throat. The silver-haired Jounin sent Assuma a cold look, but he deferred. Now, as my team is already aware, we have encountered an A to S-class Nukenin identified as Mamachi Zabuza, the demon of the mist. We have reason to believe that one of his accomplices, disguised as a Kurigakure hunter nin, has rescued him, although given the acupuncture points he must have used, we will likely not be seeing Zabuza for at least a week. Assuma began. As we do not expect an attack for at least a week, Kakashi and myself will be guarding Tazuna and his building crew on alternate days. On the days we are not guarding the bridge, we will be here overseeing your training. We are not sure how many allied shinobi Zabuza has, but the last concrete report on the size of his force was 7 members. We can guarantee that number to have been cut down by 2, thanks to our run-in with 2 of his men on our way here. Assuma paused for a moment. This means that in 7 days all 6 of you will be taken from training and given active assignments assisting us in guarding Tazuna and the bridge. You will have that long to improve your skills. I suggest you give it your all, because in the coming fight, there is no guarantee that you will survive. This isn't the academy anymore. Assuma paused again as he saw his comment sinking in. The Abiram boy showed no expression on his face, while Sakura and Sasuke both looked grim. Naruto's expression didn't change, but Assuma saw his eyes narrow. Kid looked slightly nervous, while Kitsumi looked almost excited at the thought of a real fight. She'll lose that look soon enough, he thought. Now, I'll start guard duty today, while Kakashi will oversee your training. Naruto, you have permission to use your cage bunshin for training today, but no practicing your mother's techniques on your teammates. Understand? Assuma shot Naruto a hard look. The blonde masked genin nodded back. Understood, Assuma-sensei. I'll stick to practicing on cage bunshin and inanimate objects. But permission to spend today training with Lachesis specifically. I have a few ideas for how to improve my chances against our foes, and I'd like to perfect those first. Assuma nodded. You have permission as long as you can do it within sight of Kakashi and without disrupting the others' training. Assuma turned his head to Kakashi. I'll take my leave now and escort Tazuna to the bridge. I don't want to come back and find that you have just spent the day sitting around reading those orange books. Assuma turned and walked towards the kitchen where Tazuna was waiting, ready to exit through the back door. Kakashi faced the genin. Okay, follow me. Without further preamble, Kakashi turned and walked out the open door, his team following after him. Naruto and his teammates shared a look before nodding and following. Kakashi led the 6 genin to a shady clearing in the forest surrounded by trees. Now listen up. What I am going to teach you today is an ability that will allow you to walk up any surface as if it were flat ground." Sasuke snorted, earning a glare from Kakashi. "What do you find so funny?" he asked. Sasuke snorted again before replying. "I'm sorry, but are you honestly only just now teaching your students to tree climb?" Sasuke couldn't continue as he broke out fully laughing as the look on Kakashi's face answered his question. Naruto stepped forward. "Serious Nai-san, I knew you were lazy, but I didn't think you were this lazy. Asuma-sensei has already taught us how to walk up trees and walk on water. So would you mind giving us a more difficult training while you teach your genin to walk up trees? I mean, if they can't even do that yet then they should never have been sent as backup for this mission." Naruto looked over his shoulder at Kid and Shino. "No offense meant to you guys by the way. It's not your fault your sensei is a lazy pervert." Kakashi's forehead was nearly ready to explode out of anger and annoyance as Naruto turned back to face him, his face going cold. "How about you just take care of training your team properly while I'll train my team in the habits and techniques of assassins. Surely you can get over your laziness enough to do that, Kakashi-sensei," Naruto said, his voice calm, except for putting an imitation of Katsumi's high-pitched squeak at the end. Kakashi's lone eye narrowed. "You are a genin, and you will follow my commands Naruto. Now, as I was." Kakashi paused as Naruto held up a finger. "Wrong Kakashi. I will not follow your orders. Asuma-sensei has given me permission to oversee my own training, and I am certain that he will support my decision to take over the training of my team since you seem to be insistent on retraining us in something we mastered months ago." Naruto turned and began to walk away, his two teammates starting to follow him. He didn't get very far as Kakashi suddenly blurred and appeared in front of him. "You will stop and you will listen to me." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "I may view you as an older brother Kakashi, but my patience only goes so far. I will not be held back from my training that could possibly save all of our lives when the time comes. So please, step aside," Naruto said coldly. Inside his mouth he felt his fangs reacting to his anger, itching to be deployed. Naruto fought the urges in him to strike at the danger, knowing full well what trouble he would be in if he actually attacked Kakashi. "Naruto, please, just wait." Kakashi sighed. "After I have explained the tree climbing exercise to my team, I'll give your teammates a more difficult training routine, alright?" Naruto nodded, visibly relaxing. "That is acceptable. But I'm still going to start working on my training with Lachesis and my clones. I'll be just inside the forest around us and I'll check back in with you periodically." Kakashi visibly relaxed as well, nodding before walking back over to the rest of the students. As he went Sakura rushed to Naruto's side, holding his arm worriedly. Naruto sent her a small smile, one she could see despite his mask. "Don't worry Sakura, I'm fine. The urges are under control again." Sakura let out the breath she hadn't been aware that she was holding. The three turned back towards the rest of the group as Kakashi walked up a tree to demonstrate the ability. Naruto shook his head. "Nai-san never changes," he thought to himself with a chuckle. Kissing Sakura slightly on the cheek and patting Sasuke on the shoulder, Naruto vanished in a leaf shunshin. In the woods surrounding the clearing, nearly 600 copies of Naruto suddenly appeared, each one disappearing as they sought a different means of hiding. All but one. Namikaze Naruto, 9 snakes coiled around his limbs and body, was prepared to work on his assassination techniques. With another swirl of leaves Namikaze Naruto vanished. The Genins returned to Tazuna's that evening completely exhausted. None of the members of Team 11 had managed to make it more than halfway up the tree without collapsing. The next 4 days followed a relatively similar pattern. Team 11 worked on teamwork exercises and tree climbing, while Sakura and Sasuke both worked on their taijutsu and jutsu work. Assuma had taught Sakura a jutsu on the second day that allowed her to condense water from the air around her into a powerful stream of water. He felt that it would be useful should the enemy use Kurigakure no Jutsu again, as she could help clear their vision. Naruto on the other hand had spent the entire, much to Katsumi's dismay, in the woods training. After he felt he had mastered working with his snake strikes as much as he could with his current level of physical ability, Naruto had turned his training on its head. He had transformed all his clones into copies of Zabuza and his sword and directed them to attempt to attack him just like Zabuza would have. Needless to say it was a very exhausted Naruto who returned to Tazuna's house each day. But on the 6th day of their 7 days of training Naruto didn't return. Nor could Kage Bunshin sent out by Kakashi find any sign of him. The next morning all 5 genin were split into 3 teams, Assuma taking Katsumi with him, and began to comb the forest, looking for any sign of what could have happened to the blonde genin. Meanwhile, Naruto was sitting in a clearing talking with a young boy he had encountered who had been picking herbs. Naruto had fallen asleep where he lay the night before after exhausting himself training, and the young man had woken him up shortly after sunrise. As the two young boys stood and prepared to part ways, Naruto turned away, a smile forming on his face. You know, you're really not all that bad. I advise you stay away from Tazuna and the bridge, as I'd really hate to have to kill you, mysterious Kurigakure Hunter Nin. Naruto turned back to face the shocked Haku, smiling. Or should I say, Nukenin Mamachi Haku. Before Haku could even react, Naruto disappeared in a leaf shunshin, his chakra presence rapidly disappearing. Haku had to sit down in surprise. He knew who I was. Haku thought, still in shock. Just who in the world are you, Namikaze Naruto? It was Sakura and Sasuke who finally found Naruto. The blonde boy had been walking towards Tazuna's house when his two teammates dropped out of the trees above him, Sakura embracing him tightly and Sasuke smacking him in the back of the head. Naruto just chuckled and wrapped his arms around Sakura, pulling the girl closer. He knew his disappearance must have scared them, but he could apologize later. For now he had to reassure her that he was really there and that he was really alright. Sasuke snorted and looked away as Naruto tipped Sakura's head up from his chest and stared into her eyes. Silently they closed the gap and Sakura pressed her lips against Naruto's. You Stop it, stop it, stop it. I don't want to hear this. Nope, no way. It didn't happen. I won't believe it. Kid laughed as Katsumi slammed her hands over her ears, blocking out Kid's report to Assuma on who had found Naruto. In the corner of Tazuna's kitchen, Sakura and Naruto were helping Tsunami with the dishes from lunch, and the pink-haired girl was keeping as much contact with the blonde as she could. Assuma merely shook his head, a chuckle on his breath. Kakashi certainly had more problems to deal with than he had. Anyways, listen up. Assuma spoke up, interrupting the dish cleaning and Katsumi bothering. Our enemy has likely recovered by now, so starting tomorrow you six will be joining me and Kakashi on guarding the bridge. Naruto, I trust you can deploy enough cage bunshin around Tazuna's house, just in case Gato sends mercenaries to take Tsunami and Inari hostage. Naruto nodded with a faint smile on his face. Unnoticed in the opposite corner of the kitchen, Tazuna's grandson Inari stared at the boy incredulously. I could also send some to Gatu's house to keep him and his mercenaries occupied, but that might merely bring the shinobi down on us here instead of at the bridge, so I'll save it for after we've dealt with this Zabuza and his minions. No use trying to be heroes before the real threat has been eliminated after all. Inari's eyes widened in surprise at the blonde's declaration of war upon Gatu. You can't become heroes. Inari cried out. All heroes are just people who have died fighting the impossible. Tears streamed down Inari's cheeks as he fled the kitchen headed for the stairs. Naruto looked towards Tsunami for explanation. Tsunami sighed and began to explain about Inari and the man who had become a father figure for him. Including how that man was executed by Gato as an example of what would happen to those who resisted his power. Throughout the explanation, Naruto's eyes began to narrow. By the end of it he was standing with both Sasuke and Sakura at his sides, Sakura holding onto his arm in an attempt to keep him calm. Finally, when Tsunami had finished, Naruto growled and looked up. This is bullcrap. I'm going to prove that heroes do exist and that there is no such thing as fighting the impossible. Only defeating it. Naruto turned and ran towards the stairs to the second story, Sakura on his heels. Sasuke walked more sedately into the living room and smirked as he took a seat next to Shino. At Naruto, even with all the darkness of his rough beginnings in him, he's still a spark that can light any fire. Upstairs, Naruto was verbally beating some sense into Inari. Assuma cancelled their planned training for the day because of the search for Naruto, so each genin spent the afternoon working on different stuff. Shino spent the time looking for new insect species around the clearing. Kid and Shiramaru explored the woods nearby. Katsumi had managed to rope both Sasuke and Naruto into helping her work on her taijutsu. Sakura had been slightly hurt that Naruto hadn't turned the girl down, even if his explanation that she really needed the help made sense given the situation. She had stalked off into the woods in a bad mood and just begun wandering. As she wandered further and further away from Tazuna's house, her mind lost in thought and her footsteps guided almost as if some force was directing her, the air began to slowly become foggy. It was a couple hours later, as the sun was beginning to near the edge of the horizon and twilight was dawning, when Sakura finally snapped out of her daze. She gazed around fearfully as it suddenly dawned on her that she had absolutely no idea where she was and that the air around her was almost supernaturally saturated with water. Her hand instantly shot down to the weapons pouch on her hip as she looked around. She was standing in a small twilit clearing with a small pool of water in the middle. The pool was deep and the sides of it were covered in crystals, glittering in the day's waning light. At several points around the pool there were spires of these crystals reaching towards the sunlight above, and in the center of the pool, there was a single solitary blue gem, clear as the ocean, reaching toward the heavens. The trees around the edge of the clearing were packed so tightly together that only a small opening behind her, which seemed to be a small tunnel that led under the roots of one of the massive trees, would have allowed anyone access. Sakura relaxed as she realized that she was alone and began to look around in amazement at the wonder she had found. It's beautiful," she whispered, kneeling by the edge of the pool and stroking one of the small crystals. There was something about this place that just felt right to her. She felt at peace, almost as if she were one with nature. As she sat there pondering the beauty and tranquility of this small hidden grove, a small head poked its way out from the roots of one of the trees. It was a small female fox, her fur a pale red with soft blue streaks in it. The fox's eyes were a pale slitted blue and there was a small blue diamond on its forehead. Silently the fox padded from its hiding place, three blue-tipped tails swishing as she approached the strange girl from behind. It had been a very long time since any human with the gift had found her sacred grove. She had almost given up hope that any ever would. Her last contractor had witnessed the destruction of his entire civilization at the hands of her elder brother and had broken their bond in despairing, forcing her to return to her grove. The pink-haired girl began to turn around and the fox froze, eyes glittering as she rushed to a decision. By the time Sakura had turned fully around, searching for whatever presence she had just felt, there was no sign of the blue-red fox. All that remained was a small necklace sitting on the ground, the chain of pure white gold with a small emblem of a three-tailed fox dangling from it, the eyes formed from tiny perfect chips of the blue crystal that permeated the pool. Sakura, seeing and sensing no one but herself, reached out tentatively to pick up the necklace. She hadn't seen it on her way over to the pool, but maybe she had just kicked the dirt off of it as she walked past. She lifted the necklace and stared at the little charm, amazed at how realistic and detailed it was. Stroking it between her fingers for a moment, Sakura made her decision and put the necklace on. As the fox charm settled around neck, Sakura felt a rush of wind. Unbeknownst to her, but a small part of the power that the grove contained had imparted itself unto her. After giving the beautiful grove one last look, Sakura ducked into the tunnel under the roots and disappeared. A few moments later the roots closed, erasing all evidence that there had ever been a tunnel, the only sign that Sakura had ever been there, a set of footsteps left in the dirt of the grove floor.